All right, good evening, everybody. We're gonna go ahead and get started on this episode of Tech Thursdays. This is gonna be episode 144. I almost lost count for a second there. Yeah, episode 144. Uh, I'm almost laughing because it's like I was thinking, what am I gonna? Today's Thursday. I woke up this morning and it's like today's Thursday. That means it's Tech Thursdays and I have no idea what we're going to talk about because there's literally computer hardware hasn't really been the most interesting hobby this year because of all the things that we've talked about in previous episodes where RAM prices are at an all-time high, SSD prices are at an all-time high, and graphics cards are now creeping up at an all-time high, especially the 5090, which we are going to talk about a specific 5090, as you guys can see on the screen here, the GeForce RTX Lightning from MSI. So we are going to talk about that because that's like the one thing that I was like, okay, what can we talk about on this episode? It's like, okay, well, there's the new MSI Lightning, which is an insane graphics card. You guys can see like right above me here, it's got dual 12-volt high powers, so I assume it can do 600 plus 600, 1200 watts of power when overclocking. But realistically, stock, it's probably safer to use this than every other 5090 out there because I assume MSI is doing load balancing over those two power connectors. But we'll talk about that. So I don't know, it's computer hardware has been really tough to be enthusiastic about this year, and then all of a sudden the Lightning shows up. I tend to do a lot of Dragon Ball Z, especially if you guys watch the weekend gaming live streams. I try to not do a lot of Dragon Ball Z references on Tech Thursdays because I know that not everyone that watches the show is a fan of Dragon Ball Z, so sometimes they don't get some of the references, and those who do, it's hilarious. Those who don't, I feel like they're being left out. So I try not to do that, but it's like, we've been doing retro content. Back in January, I did a lot of retro content on the gaming consoles in particular, like the PS3, the PS2, the Xbox 360, etc. Because those, believe it or not, those are considered retro. GameStop considers them retro. If you go on their website and you try to buy like a used or pre-owned or refurb GameCube or an Xbox 360 or a Nintendo Wii, they're classified as retro, which is interesting. So, but I was thinking, if I go further back, for those that are curious about me, if I go first, there was like technology, then you go further back in time, then there was Dragon Ball Z, and then if you go further back again, then there's like Power Rangers, and then there's like nothing. So that's kind of like my history. That's the reason why there tends to be Dragon Ball Z references in some of my analogies and comparisons to make things easy for people to understand. But I was going through some of my old stuff because we were talking about retro. The whole theme that I'm talking about right now is retro gaming. But if I go further back, I wasn't somebody who played a lot of games in the early 2000s or the late 90s because I was too young or I just didn't have access to any of that stuff. So it's like before that it was Dragon Ball Z, and then so that's probably why there's a lot of Dragon Ball Z references in my content. And then if you go further back, then there's like Power Rangers, right? So the Power Rangers theme goes way harder than it has any right to. Yeah, the funny thing, because it's the reason why I'm mentioning that is, so I started going through some of my old stuff in like the attic and things. So you guys might notice that I'm wearing these fancy looking glasses. These glasses are actually the PlayStation. If you guys remember, during the PlayStation 3 generation, Sony, if you guys remember PlayStation Move and Xbox Connect, a few years after that, around like 2012, I believe it was like 2012, they introduced They being Sony. Sony introduced the PlayStation 3D display. So these glasses that I'm wearing, these are the 3D, active 3D glasses that accompany the PlayStation 3D display. It was a 24-inch 1080p 3D capable display. So, and I still have it somewhere. I was digging through some old things because I was like, well, I was looking for more like retro content. But after the PS3, I figured, well, maybe we need to go back to the current time period, you know. But I found these 3D glasses, so I'm wearing the 3D glasses right now. They still work. The battery charges up really, really fast, which makes me think that the battery inside is probably not in very good shape. But they still work. But the other thing that I found, we were talking about Dragon Ball Z. So if we go even further back, so the thing about, I guess this is more like trivia for about GTR. So before there was Dragon Ball Z, so before there was computers and video games, meaning before there was PlayStation 3, there was PlayStation 2. Before there was PlayStation 2, there was Dragon Ball Z. Before there was Dragon Ball Z, there was Power Rangers. Specifically, Power Rangers Zeo and Power Rangers in Space. And I guess Turbo and Lost Galaxy would be lumped in there as well. But yeah, I found this thing. So years ago when I was a small child, I dressed up as the Gold Power Ranger. For those that know Power Rangers, the Gold Ranger was like the special, mysterious ranger that showed up like halfway through Zeo, and he had a really cool theme. He was like my hero. He was like my favorite Power Ranger of all time. He probably still is, even though I haven't really kept up with that franchise since, you know, I stopped watching Power Rangers shortly after Power Rangers in Space. So Lost Galaxy, I watched some of Lost Galaxy, which is supposedly kind of like Star Trek Deep Space Nine, although I'm not a Trekkie, so I don't really know. I know Star Trek, Star Trek The Next Generation, Star Trek Deep Space Nine, Star Trek Voyager, and then I don't know what happened after that with Star Trek. But anyway, the point that I'm making is, like, we're talking about retro, and we're kind of getting away from retro. But I found this thing, and I dressed up as the Gold Ranger when I was a small kid for Halloween one year, and my parents got me this toy gold staff. This was like his power staff. You know, it could open up and make noises like this. I put a new battery in it. I'm surprised it actually works. And then this hilt could like extend downward, and then would have like the blasting sound effect. So I don't know. I don't know why I'm showing this. I just like, I found it in the attic last weekend, and I was like, I can't believe this thing is still around. You know, like apparently I took it with me, and then just it was in a box, and I found it, and I was like, oh, that's cool. I still have my Gold Ranger staff. And it still works, surprisingly. It looks pretty beat up, though, but it's... Anyway. So, moving on. The MSI Lightning is kind of the main topic here that I want to bring up here. So, there's these reviews out on the most powerful RTX 5090 Lightning Z 32GB GPU, the Beast Unleashed. This is one of the few GPUs that has, or 5090s I should say, that has the dual 12-volt high-power connector. And this thing retails for over $6,000. I think the MSRP is supposed to be like $5,000 or something, but it's like actually it goes for over $6,000. There was another news article in India. This thing is currently priced over $9,000 US. At that point, it's not worth getting. Seriously, if this costs $9,000, if someone's going to spend $9,000 on this, they shouldn't buy this. Instead, they should buy an RTX Pro 6000, because that would have the same amount of money, and it has 3 times the amount of VRAM. So that would be a much better choice. But anyway, and it's probably also faster than this. Although this thing would be interesting to play around with, overclocking-wise. But let's go ahead and look at the Tech Power Up review, because Tech Power Up has a pretty good review article on this. Not that WCCF text is bad. I'm used to Tech Power Up in terms of their formatting, and I recommend their website if you're somebody who's wanting to do quick stare and compare comparisons between GPUs. So anyway, let's take a look at this. I want to see the teardown of it. I want to see if they have a picture of the PCB, and I know they always do. That's another reason why I like Tech Power Up's reviews. So one of the things, it does have this fancy LCD screen. I personally don't understand why this is here. I mean, this is only cool or only useful if you're somebody who vertically mounts your GPU. But the problem with vertically mounting the GPU is most likely you won't be able to actually run it at Gen 5 X16 speed. It'll drop to like Gen 4 X16. Most risers don't do Gen 5 reliably. If they do, they're very expensive. But I guess, having said all of that, if you're someone who is actually going to buy something this expensive, then an expensive vertical riser Gen 5 adapter is probably a drop in the bucket at that point. 360 millimeter AIO is required. It is included, so you have to use liquid cooling that comes with the graphics card. Interestingly enough, it is not that much more compact than the NVIDIA, the Founders Edition card, which I found interesting. However, one of the things that stood out to me is the weight. The graphics card is nearly 3 kilograms by itself without the AIO. This is just this part of it is nearly 3 kilograms. That means that this thing is heavier than the Sapphire Nitro. It's heavier than the Astral. It's without any fans, and it's that heavy. That means that the water block on this must be extremely thick, or the copper block is extremely large. So it's probably cooling everything. The VRM, let's see if they do the teardown. We'll get to the teardown. You can see those dual power connectors there. It has interestingly enough, NVIDIA has included a USB Type-C. This is probably an actual USB Type-C. It is not a display link. It is probably just a USB-C, which is actually good because if it was a display link, you could not connect a PSVR2 to this, but if it is a USB-C, you can connect a PlayStation 2 VR or PSVR2 to this without having to buy the adapter. If you're someone who wants to use a tethered OLED VR headset that's relatively affordable compared to most VR headsets. And then, of course, your standard triple display port and the standard HDMI. So, interesting that it has all of that. The most interesting thing about it, though, is the dual power connector. The dual 12-volt high power connector ensures that it will most likely do load balancing. Although it better do load balancing. Otherwise, if it's not balancing and it's pulling like 700 watts on one of those and like 0 watts on the other one, then that's not good. So it does say here in the review that the board limit is set to 800 watts default and 1000 watts in extreme mode. There is also I don't understand this, a 2500 watt BIOS available. This is not for someone who just wants to play games. The 2500 watt. The 2.5 kilowatts is meant for extreme overclocking. This is something that no one would ever bother to flash. Or if it's on there, it's actually on a switch. Okay. Okay, so is there 3 positions? There must be 3 positions. The middle one is default. Left is overclock, so the middle one is 800 watts. The left is 1000 watts, and the extreme is 2500 watts. Wow. Okay. Oh no, 1000 watts. Okay, never mind. I'm giving you guys the wrong info. So the default is 800 watts, which I assume is the OC. And then the extreme mode is 1000. So it's either 1000 or 800. And apparently you can flash a 2500 watt BIOS on there, but that voids the warranty. So yeah, no one's going to do that. Like, That's dumb. If you're spending that much money, you're not going to be flashing a 2500 watt BIOS on there. Like, that's stupid. That's only meant for some kind of extreme overclocking. That's for trying to break some kind of world record. This has the advantage that MSI is able to share the load, which means you can only hit 400. Yeah. See, so that's the thing. So this one is actually, yeah, it's an insane amount of power, but it is safer than most, if not all, the 5090s because of the load balancing between the two power connectors. I said this in 2024. I think it was almost 2 years ago. I said that at the time I said that I expect the RTX 5090 to have two of these connectors, each doing 300 watts, maxing out at 600 watt for the total card. So you'd have 300 plus 300, that's 600 total. That would eliminate the melting connector problem because the connectors are rated for 600 watts. But and the card is rated for 600 watts. But if you have two connectors, you divide 600 into two, so you get 300 each. That would have solved the problem with the melting connectors. And NVIDIA didn't do that. They released the reference card with one connector. Everyone else released their cards with only one connector. So it was very unfortunate, and the 5090 is the most common GPU to melt its connector because it is running the amperage at the max or slightly over the max on 1 to 2 wires in a very common scenario where you're in a normal environment. The ambient temperature is not some crazy number, and it still ends up melting because of bad design. So MSI doing this completely eliminates the problem with, or the fear of, the melting connector. So if I had this card, I would have no worry about ever melting the connector. You wouldn't need to monitor anything because it's gonna, like, the default BIOS at most you're gonna pull is 400, so that's not gonna mess it up. So it's actually superior in that regard. Now the challenge is gonna be finding a power supply that can handle the transient spikes. The transient spikes on this are probably really, really bad. So it can trip OCP on any old power supply. So if you are going to get one of these, definitely make sure you have a brand new power supply that does have two native 12 volt high power connectors. Do not use the adapters, the like octopus breakout cables. Those are not good. The problem is if you're using an old power supply and you're having to use those breakout cables, you're going to trip OCP like almost every day if you're playing games with uncapped frame rates. Seriously, that will happen. And we're going to show that as we get through this review. So the BIOS switch, yeah, so there we go. So you got 800 watts or 1,000 watts. Reaching the switch is more complicated. So where is the switch? Ideally, it should be designed to be easily accessible. No, because they don't want you changing it that often. Yeah, it's right there. So it's still accessible, but anyway. LED strip runs along the top. So, I mean, if I was going to use this, I would never use vertical mount, so mine would look like this. Basically rendering that LCD panel completely useless and a waste of money. So the cooler, but that's me. You know, but not everybody's me. So some people might actually do this. I never do vertical mounts because they're dumb, and I don't like riser cables because they're unreliable. So I always do this and always run at Gen 5 X16 and never have to worry about it. All right, teardown, MSI, tears down. Okay, so you can see this massive copper block, which is also a vapor chamber. And all the VRMs, all the memory, everything is sharing the copper plate, and all of it's liquid cooled. So the whole thing's liquid cooled. Yeah, you can see it's all liquid cooled. Every component is part of the closed loop. And then they have, what is this? This is the circuitry for the pump. The pump run, and when the card is idle, the pump runs at low speed and switches to a higher speed mode when the GPU Fans exceed 1,000 RPM, providing more liquid flow to help with cooling. That's interesting because most AIOs, your typical CPU AIO only runs at a max speed. It never throttles down. It always runs at full speed, which is typically like 3,200 RPM or something around there. Okay, circuit board analysis. Yeah, look at all those phases. Although this doesn't look like it has that many more than I thought it would. And you can see the fuses up there by the power connectors. You can see you get 2 per connector. I mean, that's really the only thing that I care to look at. All these phases are whatever, but I mean, they're using 33 phase VRM. Highlighted in the red rectangles is controlled by monolithic power systems, so the 29816 controller. All GPU power phases use monolithic Dr. Moss with a 60 amp rating, powering the 16 GDDR7 memory chips. These are 2 GB each, so that's how you get 32 GB of VRAM. There is a 7-phase VRM driven by the second one. So these are for the actual VRAM, those in red. And then again, just like the GPU, you have the memory controller, or the MOSFET for that. Not the memory controller, the MOS for that. Then you have the GDDR7 memory chips. You can see these are from Samsung. And then there's the actual die from NVIDIA. So let's take a look at this here. What do we got here? So they're using a 9800X3D, a carbon Wi-Fi. So MSI plus MSI. They're doing MSI plus MSI. They're using the Seasonic Prime. This is a 1600 watt power supply. That seems a little bit low on the low end for this type of GPU. You probably should have gone with a 2500 kilowatt or a 2 kilowatt. But anyway, it'll work. It will work. My question about this, the choice of Seasonic, although I guess it has the ability to handle the excursions. The problem is how sensitive is the Seasonic Prime to the voltage transient spikes, because those are going to be some really serious spikes. Serious spikes. So let's skip to the temperatures and fan noise. So let's see here. What does it say? 35 Celsius when idling, 64 Celsius under load, 60. Okay, the most impressive thing about this cooling system is the memory temperature. These are the lowest memory temperatures on an RTX 5090 that I have ever seen. 66 Celsius on the memory at 1200 or about 1300 RPM, 29 dBA. That is like really quiet. That is very good. That is an exceptional result. And then you crank it up to the extreme VBIOS at 1000 watts. The temperature barely changes, although there is something that does change. The noise level changes dramatically. You go from 29 dBA, which is basically silent, or it's not silent, but it's like whisper quiet. You're never going to notice it, especially if the computer is on a floor away from you. And then you go from that to 36 dBA. 36 dBA is actually not bad, but it is audible. It is not silent. But it is not loud. I would not say that's loud. And it is about 1500 to 1600 RPM. When I evaluate noise levels, the RPM, just speaking from experience here, the number that actually matters is the RPM for a GPU noise test, not the dBA. The dBA does indicate the noise level, but the RPM actually indicates the true audible, like how irritating will the graphics card be, not the dBA. So 36 dBA is roughly, it's actually quiet. Like you're not really going to notice it all the time. However, the sound of the fan is noticeable at about 1600 RPM. So this is not silent, but it is not annoyingly loud. So it's not a bad result. It is a good result, especially considering it's a 1000-watt VBIOS. So that is still a very impressive result. And the memory temperatures don't change. With the higher heat load from 1000-watt versus 800-watt, it's having to dissipate the extra 200 watts, and it's able to do it. And the memory temperatures don't change. So this is a very good result. Yeah, so you can see here the fan noise. Yeah, so of all the graphics cards, the legendary RX 6900 XT AMD reference card is still the quietest graphics card ever made. That thing, and I still have mine, it is so quiet. It is so impressive. No newer graphics card that I have ever owned has been able to top the legendary RX 6900 XT, 27 dBA. You can be playing Cyberpunk 2077, everything cranked out, max everything out, GPU goes full 100% load. You'll never even hear it. You won't even know your computer is on. That is how quiet the 6900 XT is. You can be playing games maxed out 1440p. Back in the day, you could even play some 4K games or games at 4K, and the 6900 XT could handle it. It had 16 gigs of VRAM. This is a pandemic GPU, and man, it was so quiet. I remember playing Final Fantasy XIV Endwalker for hours, and I completely forgot that my computer was even on. I was so immersed because I couldn't even hear the computer. I couldn't hear it at all. I didn't even know it was there. It was like I was cloud gaming. Anyway, the MSI Lightning is not as quiet at the stock, but it is also 800 watts. So that is very impressive that it can get close to the legendary 6900 XT in terms of the fan noise. But then when you run it in extreme BIOS, now it is not quiet anymore. Like I said, it's not quiet. 36 dB, you can see. It is about as loud as a RTX 5080 with about 36 dBA or an RX 7900 XT reference GPU 37 dBA. So this is audible, but this is not obnoxiously loud. For reference, the Founders Edition from NVIDIA is a noisy graphics card. It is not a quiet graphics card. The 5090 Founders Edition, 40 dBA stock. That is not good. That is a loud graphics card. It is loud. The only thing louder than it is the legendary Founders Edition RTX 3090 Ti, which was 450 watts on a cooler that was only designed initially for 350 watts. So how NVIDIA handled it? Run the fans louder and annoy the gamers, because that's all they're going to do. Just make it run loud. And that's what they did. So 5090 Founders Edition is a loud graphics card. The Lightning with 1000-watt VBIOS mode is still significantly quieter, although it is definitely not silent at 36 dBA. So these are the sort of things that I look at when it comes to the GPU, because if I was going to get one of these and pay that much money, it better be, the noise characteristics better be premium, is all I'm saying. Because I ain't going to spend that kind of money and have this thing be squealing away with like 3,000 RPM fans annoying me the whole time. You know what I'm saying? Like that's a no-go. So yeah, it's the default. I like the default BIOS. Like if I was gonna have one of these for myself, I would run it in the 800 watt BIOS, the stock BIOS, and never change it. I would never change it. That's how I would use the card. So because that gets as close to the legendary 1600 XT as possible, and that thing is still the world record holder of the quietest GPU. So anyway, let's look at the cooler performance. So let's see what they can do here. So you normalize 580 watt load. So okay, this is an interesting result. I like the Tech Power Up includes these results for the cooler performance, because ultimately what we care about is the dual power pins and the cooler. That's the only thing that matters. Obviously the price factors in. At the end of the day, a 5090 is a 5090. So how are you going to differentiate it? Noise, cooler design, RGB, and the actual thermal performance. That's all that matters. Okay, so here we go. Thermal performance, 35 dBA at 580 watts. So this is where they're running it at the power output of the Founders Edition. This is Founders Edition output. And the Lightning literally obliterates every other GPU, making the Founders Edition look like the bottom barrel garbage tier 5090. This is playing on the Founders Edition's home turf. The Founders Edition has home field advantage and literally gets destroyed. A 30-degree delta in favor of the Lightning Z. The Lightning Z, when tasked with running at the wattage of a Founders Edition, can only heat up to 52 degrees Celsius. Whereas the Founders Edition, with those really loud noise levels, is running at 83.4 degrees Celsius. Awful result for the Founders Edition. Terrible result. It's loud and it's hot. Very bad. Now, however, having said all of that, remember, the Founders Edition is a 2-slot design. 2-slot design and 580 watts equals loud graphics card. That's all you need to know. The moment I first laid eyes on the Founders Edition, the first thing I thought, without saying it out loud, because we were live when NVIDIA revealed it, was I said to myself in my head, that's going to be a loud GPU. And I was right on the mark. Okay, so memory temperatures, here we go. This probably matters even more. The memory historically is actually harder to cool than the actual GPU. So here we go. At the Founders Edition power level, which is 580 watts, the MSI RTX 5090 Lightning Z only heats the memory to 57.6 degrees Celsius, destroying all other competitors by a wide margin. Even the second best is in a distant second at 65.2 degrees Celsius. Meanwhile, the Founders Edition is cooking its GDDR7 in that oven at 95.4 degrees Celsius, less than 5 degrees from boiling water. Think about it. Those memory temperatures, those memory chips, those GDDR7 chips, those precious gems that are so hard to get right now, are literally about 5 degrees away from boiling water on the Founders Edition. So this is the reason why I tell people, if you're going to get a 5090, do not get the Founders Edition. And this is coming from someone who historically only I have a policy of only buying NVIDIA's Founders Edition graphics cards. And I'll use myself as an example. I don't have an RTX 5090 Founders Edition. This is the reason why I don't have a Founders Edition 5090, because of this 95 degrees nonsense on the memory. Because I ain't about to kill my memory after the warranty runs out, and one day you boot up a game and all of a sudden you start seeing the specs. You start seeing the white specs on the screen, and you know the warranty literally expired 2 months ago, and you're starting to see white specs when you're playing the game with an uncapped frame rate. You know what that means? It means your VRAM is starting to die. Those are the warning signs of dying VRAM. So if you didn't know that, now you know. So this will accelerate the demise of the GDDR7 on that Founders Edition by running it like that. And this is stock, by the way. This is stock settings. I like that they include stock settings. All right, power consumption. Power consumption. Okay, this is the scary part. This is the part that makes me a little concerned. So, wow, that's pretty scary. So right here, Furmark, it's running at over 800 watts of electricity. Now remember, it does do load balancing, so it's actually not that bad from a reliability standpoint, because it means that the power cable is pulling about 400 watts plus or minus 10% on each connector, and there's two of them, so that's 400 plus 400 equals 800. So you can see it's exceeding that. Some of that is from the actual motherboard power connector on the PCIe slot, so that's the extra, like it's about 20 watt, 10, it's like anywhere from like 5 to 25 watts on the power peg connector. I don't know if they have those numbers. I don't think they do that. But you can see with ray tracing, it's pretty bad. You turn ray tracing on this Lightning 5090 and you got power spikes all over the place. You have transients going from 700 watts to 800 watts. It is all over the place. I want to say something for people trying to understand these power charts. The thicker the blue is, the more likely you can experience your computer randomly shutting off while gaming. The bigger this blue bar is, like the thicker that blue bar is, the more likely your computer will just randomly shut off. And it's doing that because that is a safety feature. It doesn't mean your computer is defective. It means that your power supply is thinking that you're about to cause a fire hazard. So it's going to shut the computer off. This is something called OCP, over current protection, or OPP, over power protection, or OVP, over voltage protection. These are safety mechanisms built into a PCIe power supply, or an PCIe 5 / ATX 3.0 power supply. That is what this is. So the bigger this blue is, the more of a delta there is between the low and the high, the more likely, if you don't have a good power supply that is very tolerant of these transients, the more likely you are to encounter OCP or trigger OCP, and your computer will just shut off. Or it'll just randomly reboot. It'll just randomly reboot out of nowhere. Like you're playing a game and all of a sudden it reboots. But the common theme is that you have to be doing something where the GPU is under load. If you're sitting at the desktop doing nothing and your computer is randomly rebooting, you might have a hardware problem. Or you might have something that's imperfectly grounded. Or something weird's going on. But if you're playing a game and all of a sudden your computer just like shuts off, or all of a sudden it just restarts on its own randomly, that's usually, and you know you're using a lot of electricity, like your GPU is running at 100%, and it's this type of GPU, it's usually the power supply that causes that. So just FYI for people that don't know how to troubleshoot computers. Okay, power consumption idle. Let's take a look. So an idling, it pulls, is about the same as like the other 5090s, around 26 to 30 watts. And then multi-monitor. So if you're like me, running triple monitors or more, or 2 monitors or whatever, 30 something watts. So it doesn't really change too much. And then video playback, it's kind of on the high side, 50 watts. It's around 50 watts, we'll call it. Compared to the others, it's using quite a bit more. And then gaming. The gaming, oh boy. Okay, here we go. The gaming numbers, surprisingly, are not that bad, actually. So the default number, considering what this GPU is, 573 watts. You go to 1000 watt mode, it's just under 600 watts. So it's actually not that different. Although if you look at the matrix is pulling 543, And the Founders Edition is pulling 520. And the 3090 Ti is pulling 500. So they're all kind of in that plus over 500 range, although obviously the Lightning with the extra power capability, it's going to pull closer to 600. But this is gaming though. Remember, some games don't pull a lot of power. Other games pull a lot of power. That is the reason why, like, the good thing about Tech Power Up is they test a whole bunch of games. So this is a really good average spread. So I like their numbers because I like the way they do their testing. So usually their power consumption numbers are the ones that I actually go by compared to other reviewers. Not saying other reviewers' results are bad. It's just Tech Power Up tests a lot of games. They test old games and new games, and they average it out. And that's why you're seeing like a Founders Edition is pulling 520, even though it's meant to be do like 580. All right, here's the thing, ray tracing. What happens if you turn on ray tracing? Why would anybody buy the 5090 and not play around with ray tracing? You know, so let's take a look. As soon as you turn on ray tracing, oh boy, here's where it shows the difference. Ray tracing. Ray tracing shows the difference. You turn on ray tracing, all the 5090s jump up. All the 5090s light up like a Christmas tree, and now they're all running at their max TDP. Like Founders Edition, 585 maxed out. Matrix, 600 watts on the mark. Lightning in 800 watt mode, 745 watts. That is a very good result because remember, it's dual connector. So that's about 372 watts or 373 watts per connector. So think about this for a second. The Founders Edition is pulling 585 watts on one connector, whereas the Lightning pulls 372 per connector. So the Founders Edition is far more likely to melt its connector than the Lightning Z. Therefore, the Lightning Z, even though these numbers are way higher, like it's using what? Almost about 150 watts more than the 5090 Founders Edition, or 150 watts more than the Matrix, it's still much, much safer because it's not like its connectors are running at, you know, more than half the wattage, but still at a much, much better, safer margin from a safety and reliability standpoint. So very, very good result from the Lightning. So I like what MSI did the dual power cable thing because that was definitely needed. And then you go to maximum. So this is the Furmark number. 800 watts. So, okay, Furmark is interesting because Furmark shows you the full power. Furmark is basically when Frieza goes 100% of his full form. Like he goes 100%, he goes final form, and then he goes 100% of final form. This is the final form. Furmark brings out the final form of every GPU. It doesn't hold anything back. So you can see the Lightning, that 800 watt BIOS literally does 800 BIOS.
Best Buy listed the Lightning for $5,090.
Best Buy listed it for $50-$90. Oh man, is that supposed to be like a Best Buy meme or something? Wow, $50-$90. 59, not 50-90-99, it's 50-90-00. Let me see real quick. You know, there's like an article showing in India it's for sale for over $9,000. Is that $9,000 though? 5090. Not able to find it for. Oh, there it is. Yeah, you're right. Well, it's 5090.99. 50, 90, 99. Oh, the ones in rupees? Yeah, I was gonna say, man, $9,000 USD in India is I don't know what to say about that. Yeah, 50, 90, 99. That's funny. What if you VSync though? What if you're someone who wants to spend $5,090.99 and attach your $5,090 Lightning Z to a 1080p 60 hertz monitor so you can play World of Warcraft at 60 frames per second? What if you're someone who wants to do that? Then what? Okay? 121 watts. 121 watts to play World of Warcraft at 1080p 60 FPS capped. My goodness. I don't know, man. Does anybody do that? Let me know. Let us know in the chat if you're someone who uses a 5090 and plays games at 1080p 60 hertz. I wouldn't call that efficient, though. You know what I'm saying? Like 121 watts is not exactly what I would call efficient for that level of performance. You know, that kind of puts it in the same ballpark as AMD's RDNA 3, which is technically the last generation that competed with the 40 series GPUs. So I don't know, man. That does not look like a good result. Although it is doing better than the Founders Edition for some reason. The Founders Edition has to pull 150 watts for 60 hertz gaming, which is hilarious. But you can see it's a little bit more efficient, at least the Lightning is, than the 3090 Ti. And if you look at the older AMD pandemic GPUs, the 6090, the 6900 XT, the 6800 XT, you know, it's doing a lot better than those two. But you know, those are GPUs from like 5 years ago. So I don't know. Is it really that impressive when you're comparing it against 5-year-old GPUs? All right, and then here's what I'm always the most interested in. When it comes to these high performance, stupidly priced, enthusiastic GPUs with insane cooling, really good fan profiles, and tons of RGB, it's the spikes. It's the 20 millisecond spikes that actually matter, because these, and I'm so glad that Tech Power Up includes these numbers, because these are the numbers that will tell you if your computer is just going to randomly shut off because it's going to trip OCP. So here we go. Usually, the rule of thumb is if you're on an ATX 2.0 power supply, meaning you're on a power supply that doesn't have a native 12-volt high-power cable, which means your power supply was never designed to support an RTX 5090. If you have one of those power supplies, meaning if your power supply is at least 3 to 4 years old or older, then you could trip OCP with this GPU. Meaning your computer could randomly just shut off while you're playing a game with the frame rate uncapped because the PSU thinks you're about to like burn your house down, you know? So it doesn't know any better. So it's like, just shut the computer off. This thing's melting. Just shut it off, you know? Like, so anyway, or just restart the computer. Just reload the computer. Just start it. Just redo it. So that if that's happening, then you're probably tripping OCP and you probably need to change your power supply. Just FYI. So, oh boy, this is not good. Oh, that's not good. 840 watt spike and 978 watt spike. Keep in mind, these are 20 millisecond spikes. 20 millisecond spikes. If you have an ATX 2.0 power supply, especially if you have a Seasonic power supply, if you want this graphics card, you better get a new power supply. Because anything that's like 5 years old, doesn't have a native 12-volt power connector on the power supply, I wouldn't trust it to work with this GPU. From my personal experience testing power supplies and graphics cards in the past, if a graphics card exceeds 550 to 600 watts on the transient spikes, it will shut off your computer. Case in point, I have verified with my very own Founders Edition RTX 3090 Ti and my AMD reference 6900 XT. I can make my computer shut off while playing Final Fantasy 15, not Final Fantasy 16, Final Fantasy 15 at 4K, maxed out, uncapped frame rate. I can trigger OCP on my old 1000 watt Seasonic Prime Titanium with a 6900 XT. I can, there's a part in the Final Fantasy 15 benchmark. It's where the big fire explosion happens in the city. On cue, I can get my computer to just literally shut off with the 6900 XT because of that 600 plus watt spike. So I know for a fact that the Lightning Z can do that with those old power supplies. So definitely this type of GPU with these type of transient loads are not meant to be used with power supplies from 5 years ago. So if you have a 5-year-old power supply or a 4-year, I mean, it could even be a 3-year-old power supply or even a recent power supply. If it doesn't have a native cable, it is not ATX 3.1, and it's probably not designed to be tolerating these type of spikes. Because the difference between the power supply that tolerates them and a power supply that doesn't tolerate them is, even though the older power supply technically can handle these spikes, it was never trained. It was never designed to know, hey, I'm not about to blow up the computer. I'm just playing a game that has a spike. The GPU is very spiky in the power profile. It's going to peg, like, within a 20 millisecond interval, it might jump to close to 1000 watts. That doesn't mean that I'm about to explode the computer, so don't shut off the computer. The power supply doesn't know that. The power supply, no one told the power supply, that you're running this test in Chernobyl and it's 1986 and you need to run the turbine down. It's like, it doesn't know, so it's gonna be like, we ain't doing this. We ain't doing this. I'm just gonna turn the computer off because we ain't about to create another Chernobyl. You know what I'm saying? That's the way those old power supplies think. Old power supplies have that mentality. So they're not going to let your 5090 go to 1,000 watts intermittently while playing Cyberpunk 2077. No, it's just going to shut the computer off because it doesn't know any better. So it's not that it's defective. It's not defective. See, the clear thing that I'm trying to clarify for people watching this, when your computer shuts off because you have a GPU that can spike to 1,000 watts, that doesn't mean your computer is defective. That does not mean you have defective hardware. That means that your computer is trying to protect you because it doesn't know, well, it's trying to protect itself also, but it doesn't know any better. It's an older power supply. It was never designed to work with power spikes of this magnitude. That's all it is. So, yeah, if you're going to get one of these, you have to have a new power supply that has the dual 12-volt power cables natively on the power supply, and that will tolerate this, and everything will be fine, and the computer won't randomly shut off. So anyway, hopefully that's informative to people, because I can see it now. There's going to be people who buy this GPU. They're going to pair it up with like a 10-year-old power supply. Like, they're going to pair it up with some ancient Corsair HX 1200 from back in the day, and they're going to be playing Cyberpunk or something. They have RT turned on. They're going to crank it up to the 1000 watt VBIOS and think, oh man, this is so good. And then the computer just shuts off randomly. And they're going to be like, oh, I have a defective GPU. And they're going to go on Reddit and they're going to like, man, this $5,090 GPU that I bought from Best Buy is a joke. It is defective. It randomly turns my computer off. It is defective. It's not defective. It means the person who bought it doesn't know what they're doing. That's all it is. So anyway, I just want people to be aware of that because that's something that I see from time to time reading like PC hardware articles, or not articles, like threads on like Reddit and stuff, and people have no idea what they're talking about half the time. And this is an example of that. It's like not having the knowledge of what a power spike looks like, how it manifests in the system, like what are the symptoms? Oh, the computer shuts off, or the computer will randomly like it'll do one of two things. It'll either shut off, or it'll shut off and then turn back on. It was like as if you had a power outage. But it's because of this. It's this combined with a power supply that's not designed to support this type of wattage, these intermittent wattages. So, because I've already seen like posts of people complaining about the Matrix, the Asus Matrix. There's people complaining that it's defective because it shuts off their computer. It's not the Matrix, dude. It's the person not understanding how it works. So, I mean, yeah. Anyway. I don't know if I need to make a video on what that looks like how to trip OCP and what it looks like. Because I mean, I know how to do it. I can do it on Linux. I can do it on Windows. It's very easy. I got to bust out my old 6900 XT. That was the best GPU I had at triggering OCP. It actually triggered it more frequently than the 3090 Ti, and you can see why right here. 623 watts versus 584 watts. So anyway, let's look at overclocking potential. Overclocking potential. So what do they do here? What do they crank it up to? So they did. Okay, so Blackwell, NVIDIA has removed the hotspot sensor. You still have access to GPU temperature and memory temperature. So, okay, so you can't read hotspots anymore. That's probably because the hotspot on Blackwell is very, very high. Because it is very heat dense. All right, another Blackwell change is that NVIDIA is now blocking memory overclocking if it's higher than plus 375 megahertz. So that's about plus 6,000 megatransfers. Setting any higher value will result in a maximum frequency of plus 375 getting applied no matter how high the requested value is. The reason why they're doing this, I'll tell you the reason why NVIDIA is doing this. The reason why NVIDIA is doing this is because of the Founders Edition graphics card. It has nothing to do with the Lightning. It has nothing to, well, I mean, it's kind of related to board partners, but it is primarily because of the terrible, ineffective Founders Edition cooler that they have put on the 5090 that they have. Because you guys saw earlier that the temperature on the 5090 Founders Edition on memory is 94, 95 degrees. It was like 95.4 degrees Celsius. So 5 degrees away from boiling water. That's the reason why they don't let you go above plus 375. Because NVIDIA marches to the beat of their own drum. If their card runs at 95 degrees Celsius, it doesn't matter if MSI goes and makes one that can keep the memory at 66 Celsius. NVIDIA doesn't care. They don't care that MSI spent all that engineering effort to keep the memory temperatures that low. But because the NVIDIA first-party card runs 95 degrees Celsius, no one is allowed to overclock the memory above plus 375 because it won't be stable. On the Founders Edition, it will not be stable. Pushing the memory that's already running that hot under load at plus 6,000 megatransfers, you're gonna not be stable. You're gonna get memory artifacting. You're gonna see the specs, the white specs on screen while running Unigen. That's gonna be going everywhere. Memory errors everywhere. Black. You're gonna get all the weird, the triangles. You know, Monster Hunter is gonna have triangles going in the background and stuff. No, that's why they don't allow that. They do not allow that. However, because the Lightning is so good, the Lightning is definitely capable of running above plus 375 on the memory. 100%, because the temperature is the silicon is also a limiting factor, but in this scenario, the temperature will always be the limiting factor on the Founders Edition before anything else, before power, before the silicon quality. No, it'll always be the VRAM temperature that will limit the overclock on the Founders Edition. And that is the reason why there is a hard limit here. MSI's Afterburner has extended voltage control support for the Lightning Z. You may adjust the voltages for GPU, memory, auxiliary, so that's MSVDD, and the aux2. So this is like a PCIe voltage identification definition. I'm not sure like what is like something on the PCIe side. Pushing GPU voltage to max yielded another 100 megahertz real measured clock. So that means they got about 6.5% extra performance after overclocking. And that is keeping at the 800 watt BIOS. So that's not that bad. If I was going to overclock, this is the way I would do it. I wouldn't use the 1000 watt BIOS. I'll never use the 1000 watt BIOS if I ever have this graphics. Not saying that I'm going to get one. I'm just saying, like, if I had one, I would leave it in 800 watts, and I would do exactly what Tech Power Up is doing here to try to see at the same amount of power. Now, it is going to go up because you're maxing the power, so your power consumption is going to go up, but you're going to stay confined to the 800 watt VBIOS. And you can see he's getting about 6.5% with the max power. Without max power, meaning he just keeps the power the same, stock BIOS, stock power, and just cranks the clocks, he is able to get about 6%. So that's actually really good. So the green result is what I would aim to do, because I don't like running the power higher than necessary. 800 watts, it's already going to dump so much heat in the room. You don't want any more heat. It's already too much. Man, the only CPU, the X3D CPU is, yeah, I can't even think of any other CPU to use with this besides that. All right, value and conclusion. The MSI GeForce RTX 5090 Lightning Z will sell for $5,090. So Best Buy is showing it at the actual price. This is the legitimate MSRP. $5,090 US dollars. Dual 16-pin power up to 1000 watts. Very large overclock out of the box. 10% faster in real life than the 5090 Founders Edition. Excellent voltage control. Runs much quiet. Yeah, it is very impressive in how quiet it is. Quiet, especially in 800 watt mode. Yeah, it's almost as good as the Legendary card. DLSS 4.5 frame gen, blah, blah, blah. Transformer upscaling. Integrated LCD screen. Good additional overclocking potential. Voltage monitoring points, 32 gigs VRAM. Highly energy. I don't know if I'd call this highly energy efficient. I'm not sure what exactly they mean by highly energy efficient. I mean, I guess if that's referring to how much power the cable is pulling, like per cable. Fan stop supported. I don't care about fan stop. Dual BIOS. That's good. Support for HDMI. Oh, not that I would ever use the 1000 watt BIOS, but whatever. Support for HDMI 2.1 plus. It's still good to have this. I don't want people to get the impression that I don't care about dual BIOS. I definitely care about dual BIOS, especially on graphics cards, because graphics cards, if you flash a BIOS to test an overclock, if the flash goes wrong, you still have the other VBIOS to switch over to, and the card will continue to work. And then you can flash to the corrupted one by just switching it over to the other one before you do the flash. So dual BIOS is always very good. But at this price point, I kind of think it should have had triple BIOS, if you know what I'm saying. Like there's some few GPUs, they're rare, but there are some that do have triple BIOSes. Anyway, Support for HDMI, PCI 5.0, or HDMI 2.1, DisplayPort 2.1, PCI 5.0. Good video, yeah. All the same stuff from all the 5090s. The negatives. Obviously, the 5090 price being $50-$90. Radiator requires extra space. Yeah, this is another thing, though, that is going to be probably a huge deal breaker for a lot of people. If you're already doing a 360 AIO for your CPU, now you have to have another 360 AIO for the GPU. But the people that are going to buy this card, they know what I would hope that they know what they're doing for the PC build. So, or they could always just run their CPU on an air cooler, although I wonder if they're going to do that. Like if you have a giant knock to a D15 or something, is there enough space for the radiator tubes of the GPU to be able to reach the top, assuming you're gonna mount the AIO on the top? So it's almost one of those things where it's like if someone's gonna actually use this GPU, they're going to need to have a case that can support dual 360 AIOs, one for the CPU, one for the GPU, because I'm just thinking like how would that work if you have the tubes running either in front of the air CPU cooler or behind it. Either way, it's going to mess with the airflow. So I don't know. You could always put it in the front. I don't like mounting a 360 AIO at the front of the case or the bottom of the case, because the bottom of the case won't have enough static pressure, because the intake fans already have static pressure from the surface that they're close to. And also they have to push through the bottom of the case, and then you add a 360 AIO on top of that. Now you just killed your static pressure. Unless you're gonna do like a push-pull and add like 3 more fans, so the cooler for a push-pull config. But I don't know. That just adds that. Then the problem with doing that is you might not be able to use your second or third PCIe slot because the cooler blocks the path, you know what I'm saying? And if you're going to do a vertical mount GPU, then you can't really put it on the bottom. So it's a lot of things to think about when it comes to planning out a build with a GPU like this. Pump is always running even when fans are stopped. Well, that's because it has to. That's not how pumps. There's no such thing as pump stop. Come on, Wizard. What are you talking about? High idle. Why is this even a negative, man? Like this shouldn't even be here. This is not a negative. High idle multi-monitor video playback power consumption. That's all 50 series. Memory over. Well, okay, I shouldn't say all. That's like all the GB. What is it? The Blackwell 203 and 202. All of them have high idle power. Memory overclocking artificially limited by the driver. So yeah, that's because of the Founders Edition. Okay, so that's pretty much it for the 5090 for $50-$90. Yeah, and that's one of the reasons why I always leave my iGPU enabled. Okay. Who here is getting one of these? It's like, raise your hand if you plan to get one of these. I guess I'll just put a poll out to make this anonymous. Are you getting a 5090 Lightning? Yes or no? And please don't lie. If you're not gonna get one, say you're not gonna get one. Don't pretend that you're gonna get one and throw off the numbers. That's super lame. You might get one to put it inside me. Dude, I don't think that's how it works. I don't think people who have yachts would get this, to be honest. Like, if someone has a yacht, they're not going to get one of these. They would already have an RTX Pro 6000. You know what I'm saying? Like, why would anybody with a yacht get one of these? This isn't meant for people with yachts. The RTX Pro 6000 Founders Edition mode is the one that's for people with yachts. So they can show off because they got the 96 gigs of VRAM on their their 5090 Ti. You know what that's still faster than this. It's for decoration. Oh, I get it. Okay, yeah. Oh yeah, you said for your yacht. Yeah, inside the yacht. I get it now. Okay. Yeah. You go with the 9070 XT. Raise your hand if you plan to get scammed. Well, you know what? The thing is, I was thinking, like, are scalpers gonna buy this up? If so, that's kind of dumb. Because the price of it is so high. Like, what is a scalper gonna do? They're gonna buy this and then try to flip it on eBay or Facebook Marketplace? I mean, how much could they flip it for, though? Who would actually buy a Lightning 5090 from a scalper, you know, off of like Facebook Marketplace or something? Like, who would actually do that? I mean, there's probably people out there that would. I'm just saying, like, I can't imagine anyone that I know doing something like that. You would laugh at somebody. Yeah, because here's the thing. This GPU has a limit to how much you could resell it for. Because of the RTX Pro 6000. The RTX Pro 6000 is like $8,000 to $9,000. So the highest I could see this going for is maybe $6,000. But here's the thing. Once you're that high up there, like once you're that far over the deep end, there's no going back. So it's like if you're considering spending $6,000 on a GPU, why don't you just spend $2,000 more and get an RTX Pro 6000? It's so much easier to purchase. It's so much more readily available than this. And it has the added benefit of just being faster and having 3 times the amount of VRAM. So yeah, I agree with fake frames. This thing is a scam. Like, if anyone, like, as it is, it's because of its price point, I wouldn't say it's a 100% scam. But in the current market that we exist in today, where memory prices are at an all-time high, 5090s are in very, very short supply, very low supply. It's very hard to find an actual 5090 right now. And because of that, this has created a window of opportunity for MSI to be like, hey man, let's take advantage of the enthusiasts. Let's just throw, that's a bad way of saying it, but ultimately that's what they're doing. They're going to throw this in the market. You know, like, they're going to throw it out there. It's like you're going fishing. MSI's going fishing. They throw it out there, and they're going to see, like, I got someone. I got someone. Oh, it was just a scalper. Oh, they're going to put it. Okay. You know, like, MSI is just fishing in. They're just trying to catch the enthusiasts. Throw this thing in a market where everything's so expensive. What's $5,000? What's $5,090? You know, if you're planning out your build and you want like 96 gigs of system memory or 64 gigs of memory or whatever, and you want 5 SSDs and whatever else in there, like a Ryzen 9950X 3D or an Intel Core Ultra 300 or something, and you're gonna do like multiple use cases, not just gaming, like maybe someone would be thinking about justifying this for that, but I don't know. It's so expensive. No one should be scalping this. If someone's going to try to scalp this, that's pretty dumb. Because there's a maximum they can get on the return. Like, they can really only, at most, probably get $1,000. Is it worth all the effort to go through trying to get one of these just to turn it around for $1,000 when you had to carry $5,000 balance on a credit card or something? You know, to me, it's dumb. To me, it's kind of stupid. It's truly an enthusiast graphics card, though. So I applaud MSI for making this so that it exists. But I just don't, other than extreme overclockers who probably have sponsors helping them cover the cost of doing what they do, trying to break world records, I don't know who this is for outside of that small demographic of enthusiasts. You know what I'm saying? So, yeah, it's a cool thing. I like that it exists. It's just, it's releasing at a really bad time when everything around it is so expensive and then it itself is so expensive. And the only reason why MSI is able to justify this pricing is the same reason why people were able to justify GPU pricing back during the pandemic, because of the supply shortages. And now the excuse, it's a valid excuse, is, oh, memory is so expensive, it's so hard to get, the chips are so hard to get, NVIDIA's holding back supply because they're prioritizing all of the B300s and all the RTX Pro 6000s for the data center customers and all the AI bros. So it's like, what are you gonna do? You're gonna have to throw it out there and raise the price. How much do you think it costs MSI to build one of these? The BOM cost on this is probably in the realm of like $350, if I had to guess. I mean, the most expensive thing is getting the chip from NVIDIA. The chip from NVIDIA is, they're buying a lot of them. Let's put it that way. So they're able to get a bulk discount. The BOM cost of this is, remember, I'm not counting the chip from NVIDIA. I'm counting everything else. So the AIO, the tubing, the motor pump, the VRMs, all the MOS, all that stuff, the VRAM. The VRAM is the most expensive thing. The VRAM is the most expensive thing. So if you don't include the VRAM and you don't include the chip, the BOM cost is probably $200, maybe even less. But the chip from NVIDIA will bring it up to like 700, 600. And then you increase the memory. You put the memory on there. The memory is probably going to make the BOM cost, I don't know. I don't know what the GDDR7 price is right now, but it's, if I had to guess without doing any research, I would say the total BOM cost, including the chip from NVIDIA, including the GDDR7, the cost is probably around $1,500 to $2,000. And they're charging $5,090. So they're making a good margin on it if they sell it. But the BOM cost is probably pretty high though because of GDDR7. I would say in a normal market it would cost them about $1,500 BOM cost. But with GDDR7 the way it is, it's probably more than $2,000 to make this because of the memory. Because they have to buy the memory by themselves. They cannot just buy it from NVIDIA anymore. So the BOM with the current market is probably around $2,100 to $2,300. It's $30 per 2 gigabytes GDDR7 module. Yeah, but remember, I'm trying to keep in mind that they're only manufacturing like 1,300 of these. So if they're buying, let's say they buy enough VRAM from Samsung to make 1,300 of these, yeah, the BOM cost is going to be somewhere around $1,700 to $2,100. That's going to depend on that discount from Samsung and also NVIDIA. But yeah, they're going to make a lot of money on it still, but you know, that's because they're pricing it. They're taking advantage of the pricing of everything else right now. Historically, AIBs don't make a lot of money on GPUs, but you guys already know that. So the margins are razor thin, but because they price it so high, because think about what I just said. I said the BOM cost is somewhere between $1,700 to $2,100. What is the MSRP of the Founders Edition 5090? The Founders Edition goes for $2,000. That's the official price. So I just said that the BOM cost for the Lightning is $1,700 to $2,100. I don't know the exact number, but I would guesstimate in that range. That means in a normal market, they're not making a lot of money on it if it was priced at say, $3,000. And if it costs them $2,100 to make it, so they're pricing it at $3,000, so they're going to get, okay, $900, that's pretty good. If they price it at $3,000. But normally GPUs don't sell for that much. Normally a 5090 goes for like 2500, 2300. If you think about the prices from 6 months ago, that's what the typical price point was. So if your BOM cost is close to $2,000 and you're selling it at $2,300, you're making $300. How much of that revenue actually is profit though? Because I don't know. We're talking about BOM costs. We're not talking about inventorying cost, partner cost, reseller margin, all that other stuff. So there's other stuff in there that affect the profitability, the actual profit versus revenue difference for MSI. That's the reason why EVGA left the GPU industry. That was one of the primary reasons, if not the main reason. So they don't make a lot of money from these GPUs. But when you price it at $5,000, or like about 5,100 grand, now all of a sudden you are making money. Yes, but what I'm saying is if we were in a normal market, this thing would have probably been priced around 3,000 to 3,500. So they still would have made a decent amount on it. They would have made, like around $1,500. That's a good amount of return. Now, with it being 5,000 whatever, now they're making a lot on it. But they're probably not going to make that many of it. That's what tells me the fact that it's a limited run. Usually limited runs do have a higher BOM cost, but they're also priced appropriately to recoup a lot of that so they can actually turn a profit selling it as a limited edition product. So anyway, I think if Mike was here, we would get a better accurate number, but my number still, I stand by my number. I would say it's somewhere between $1,700 to $2,100. Like the actual cogs to make it. And most of that is memory and the actual GPU from NVIDIA. See, this is the thing. Because MSI doesn't make the chip, they have to buy the chip from NVIDIA. So that right there is going to increase the BOM cost, the bill of material, a lot. A lot. No, historically, that is the biggest portion. But because of the current market with memory, I wonder if it's still the biggest portion. I think it still is. I'm pretty sure the GPU from NVIDIA, the die, is still the most expensive part. Second is the memory. But now the ratio, the memory has a much larger chunk of that pie than it did a year ago. Let's see. So, all right, I guess we don't need to read through any of this. I think it's cool that it exists. Do I recommend getting one? Absolutely not. Will I get one? No. So I voted no. I mean, I can't vote on my own poll, but if I was voting, I would count to the no category there. But yes, so we got 23 votes, 83% say no, 17% say yes. It's cool that it exists, but man, right now is totally not the type of market to... Now is not the time to be in the market for a GPU, unfortunately. Like, just everything about the PC DIY market is just so bad right now. It's just, it's not even fun to talk about. All right, well, that was really the only thing that I wanted to discuss in terms of the new technology that was announced this week. I guess in one thing that Tech PowerUp did do, Tech PowerUp did do a Neo handheld performance review. I really wish they would have done an actual like PC desktop performance review, because this game, Neo 3, my initial impressions of it was that it was easier to run than Rise of the Ronin. I was completely wrong. Because when you go, okay, it's a little bit easier. It's still a little bit easier to run, but the only reason why it's a little bit easier to run than Rise of the Ronin is because it's a little bit less CPU bound. Rise of the Ronin was an open world game with day and night cycles, with a lot of NPCs, with a lot of random quests and objectives that were roaming around the map at any given time. Neo 3 doesn't have that. Neo 3 is an open world game, mostly. It's an open world game. But it doesn't have a lot of dynamic things. Like, it's... all the missions are... they just kind of like flow naturally, and it never feels like it's as CPU limited.
I still remember people laughing at me on Reddit when I bought the Astral on launch day. Guess who is laughing now?
Yeah, if you wanted a 5090, the time to get one was when they were new and the second wave. So you got yours in that first wave. I ended up getting mine in the second wave. But yeah, basically, if you wanted a 5090, the time to get it was that first 6-month interval. After that, actually, it did actually go down in price a little bit to around, I remember around August of last year. August, September. The price on it, right before the whole like memory thing happened, it was actually pretty good. Like most, like Fake Friends was saying, most of it, or whoever was saying, somebody said earlier like $2,500, or maybe you said it was $2,500, or someone said it was $2,500. I remember a lot of them were going for like $2,500. And if you guys remember me talking about the 5090 back in 2024, before it launched, remember when I speculated about the price and I said that the MSRP would be $2,499? Now, I was wrong. I was proven wrong by NVIDIA because NVIDIA priced the Founders Edition at $2,000. But I was right in the sense that last year, the average sale price was around $2,500, which was what I said it would have cost before it launched. We have proof of it on multiple episodes of Tech Thursdays from 2024. So, yeah, it kind of sold at $2,500 for most months from around May. I remember from May to early September. If you really wanted a 5090, all you really needed was $2,500. You didn't need $3,000 or whatever those. I mean, unless you wanted the Astral, right? If you wanted the Astral, you were paying more because Asus had that feature built in to monitor the pins, so they were able to justify selling it at a price premium. But if you didn't care about that, you just wanted a 5090, $2,500, and it was pretty readily available. I remember going to Micro Center and checking on it, and this was already when I already had one. And yeah, they were every time I went in Micro Center last summer, they were readily available. I remember the Zotac was like the Zotac got all the way down to like $2,100. And the PNYs were going for like $2,500 for a long time. They were readily available, $2,500 for a long time. If you guys remember, my first 5090 was the PNY. That GPU was going for like $2,500 all of last summer into like early fall of last year. If you lived near a Micro Center, you could easily get a PNY 5090 for $2,500. I think the RGB was either the RGB was $2,500 or it was $2,600, and the non-RGB was $2,300 or $2,400. So, yeah, they were readily available. But obviously not anymore. But yeah, going back to Neo 3, I kind of wish, or I hope that they do an actual performance review for the PC platform, because this game is actually pretty hard to run. So I know I said last week when I took a look at this game on stream, I said that this game is not that hard to run. I think I misspoke because I was running the game on very high spec hardware. If you go and run this game on lower spec hardware or the recommended specs from Team Ninja, it's not good. This game is not easy to run. It is basically just as hard to run as Rise of the Ronin, only it is slightly less CPU demanding. That doesn't mean that it's not CPU demanding. It's less CPU demanding, but it is still very hard to run. So, and we're going to take a look at this, and I think the results that you're going to see from Tech Power are going to prove that this game is no joke. It is hard to run. It is like Final Fantasy 16 levels of hard to run. All right, so, and if you guys play that, you know what I'm talking about. Okay, so this is how the game looks on the handheld. These are some screenshots. And yeah, it's a very good game. This is the best. This is hands down the best game I've played all year so far. This is the front runner game of the year for me personally. So we'll see if Crimson Desert can top this, but man, that's a tall order because this game is fantastic. It is hard to run, but it is fantastic. All right, let's get through all these screenshots here, man. That's a lot of screenshots. All right, here's what they do. They're testing. Why do we have 9070? What? Oh, okay. That's good to see the 9070 XT. That means that there is probably going to be a PC performance review. They just pulled the screenshots off of this. So let's take a look. Out of box experience on Steam OS. Out of box experience on wait, what are they saying? You're greeted with a fairly short shader pre-compiling step that takes a few minutes to complete during the initial launch. On subsequent launches, you only have to wait for a few seconds. One of the first issues we encountered was that movies wouldn't play. We tried running the game with Proton GE, which usually solves the issues, but no, it didn't work. Unfortunately, movies are not playing. At least on Steam Deck. Overall performance on Steam Deck is atrocious. Atrocious. You may hit 30 FPS in the tutorial area. Okay, and to be clear, the tutorial area is the only part of the game where it is not demanding. As soon as you go into the open world, it is balls to the walls, super hard to run. Well, yeah, once you're out in the open world, the frame rates drop to around 20 FPS with constant drops to the high. Let's just get into it. Let's just get into it. Show me the results. Here we go. Let's see what there we go. Here we go. Here we go. Xbox Ally X premium handheld gaming experience. Neo 3 720p, very low settings. Xbox Ally X, 25 watt. That's the high power mode. 31 FPS. 31 FPS. On the 25 watt mode on the Xbox Ally X. On the regular X... Oh, no, they didn't do regular. Never mind. ROG Ally X. It's 29 FPS. On the 25 watt mode. So apparently Microsoft Xbox, the branding does something. I thought it was just a rebrand, but apparently if your ROG Ally has Xbox Ally in the name, if Xbox is in the name, you gain performance for some reason that I don't understand. Because I thought these were physically the same thing. But apparently the Xbox does a better job. Xbox Ally X. 31 FPS for that cinematic experience. This is at 720p on the lowest settings possible. So the best you can hope to do on an Xbox Ally X is at 25 watts is 31 FPS at 720p with everything turned to the minimum, to the lowest settings. The reason Koei Tecmo hasn't made the Katana Engine 2 yet is because even they were... you might actually not be wrong. You know, that statement sounds like a meme statement when I first read it, but that might not be that far from the truth. I would not be surprised. All right, performance scaling. Here we go. What do we got? 15 watts. It drops to 21 FPS. So if you're trying to extend the battery runtime, 21 FPS. On very low. On low settings, it drops to 18 FPS. Like I said, yeah, this game is no joke. This game is super hard to run. This is like a very demanding game. It makes me remember now how Rise of the Ronin was a very demanding game to run on PC. More demanding than this. More demanding than this. Wow, man. Neo 3 is stretching its legs, showing how challenging it can be to run. All right, let's see. Steam Deck. Optimized setting. The game is unplayable on Steam Deck, and no amount of upscaling and frame generation can improve performance enough to make it playable. Wow. It is so hard to run that you can't play it on the Steam Deck. Steam Deck unfortunately doesn't even meet the minimum requirements. You know what this makes me want to do? It's funny you're bringing up Panther Lake and Strix Halo. Oh man, I want to try Strix Halo on this game. I want to play this game on Strix Halo to see what happens. This is some scary stuff. All right, let's look at this. Okay. Xbox Ally X. Optimized settings. So here we go. If you own the Xbox Ally X, apply these settings in the screenshot above. Setting the resolution to 900p. Upscaling to 50% of 900p. And so that's like performance preset for like FSR. And increasing the power limit to 35 watts will deliver an average performance of around 45 frames per second. Oh man, they desperately need frame gen. But I don't think you can do frame gen on the Xbox Ally X. Can it do it? Can you do frame gen? I think you can actually, right? I don't see it as a setting option in here looking at the screenshot. There will be drops to the high 30s, but the game is still borderline playable without looking like a smeared mess. We also suggest disabling most, if not all, post effects. Alternatively, locking the frame rate to 30 FPS and setting upscaling to 65%, the equivalent of FSR quality, results in very stable performance with minimal stutter, but playing at 30 FPS is far from ideal for... Yeah, I totally agree with the reviewer here. This is not a game that you want to be playing at 30 FPS. This is definitely a game that you need a smoother frame rate than 30, because it is a challenging action game that is very demanding. You have to pay attention. You cannot play this game like you're doing dailies in Genshin or WoW. Like that, you will fail. You will fail so hard in this game. This game will destroy you if you try to play this game like some casual logging into WoW to do your weeklies or the Valentine's event in Final Fantasy 14 where you got to run around and build a cake like it's like Chairman Kaga from the Iron Chef or whatever, because they've got that event going on right now, FYI. So it's not like that. No, you gotta pay attention or you're just gonna get shredded by the enemies in this game. Like the AI in this game is no joke. So yeah, 30 FPS is that is no good. That is no good. You can enable okay, here we go. You can enable frame gen, but the base frame rate is too low, resulting in a noticeable increase in latency. Yeah, I figured, because if you're gonna take 30 FPS and double that to 60, that is not how to use frame gen. Although Capcom and the developers of Monster Hunter Wilds would argue that's debatable. Further, frame drops result in very annoying latency spikes when frame gen is. Yeah, in a game like this, I would never want to use frame gen in a game like this. Neo 3 also includes a dynamic resolution setting, but we found that manually adjusting. Okay, yeah. The developers have said that the way they expect people to play this game is to use dynamic resolution scaling. Because they said in an interview with, I don't know if it was Famitsu or somebody, is a Japanese interview. They said that the thing is, usually with Japanese developers, they don't really go into the technical aspects of the game, like at this sort of level, talking about the actual settings. But there was a few questions. One of the questions that they did answer referred to, like, how best to experience the game. And they said that they recommend that all gamers use dynamic resolution scaling. That was the answer that they gave. It was intended, the game was designed from the ground up for dynamic resolution scaling to always be enabled. Meaning, when you first boot up the game, and they're absolutely right, because when I verified this myself, when I first booted up Neo 3 on PC for the first time, the default profile enables dynamic resolution scaling in the background, and they hide it behind like 3 levels deep in the menu system. It's not like if you click on visuals, you don't immediately see that it's turned on. You see your monitor resolution, so you see your native resolution and all that other stuff. You can find DLSS, FSR, and all those things. But the dynamic thing is hidden away because they don't want people turning that off. And the reason why they don't want people turning it off is because the game is so incredibly demanding that they want gamers to feel like, oh, it's smooth, it's butterly smooth, when in reality, the game is dropping to like 720p in the background, via dynamic resolution scale. So that's the reason why they want you to do that. So it says here you can enable dynamic resolution scaling set to 45, but the game feels slightly more fluid and responsive with it disabled. I guess. I mean, I didn't realize that dynamic resolution was turned on while I was playing the game until like 3 hours in. I started messing with the settings and I found the menu, the hidden menu where the dynamic resolution thing is there. And I was like, wait a minute, what? This is on the whole time? So yeah, you turn it off and all of a sudden the game is much, much harder to run. ROG Ally X owners should apply very low, setting the resolution to 900p, upscaling to 45% of native, and increase power to 30 watts for similar level. So yeah, man, this game is no joke. It's Neo 3, it's the best game ever. This is the best game of 2026 so far. And it is a really hard game to run. You had to make sure it was on DLAA. Yeah, this is one of those games though that maxes out the 5090. The 5090 at 4K, it's maxed out on this game. Because I checked, I can see the utilization on it. So the Katana engine, man, it can scale. It can scale. Anyone who tried Rise of the Ronin last year knows. Because this game basically runs the same as Rise of the Ronin on PC. It's just slightly less CPU demanding. Because it has slightly less NPC activity in the game world. One thing though, this is an interesting thing when it comes to Japanese game engines. Like, Japanese game engines tend to have challenges with scaling, like to these large open environments. We saw this for the past 2 years with Capcom's RE engine. If you guys remember, in 2024, Capcom released a game called Dragon's Dogma 2. Dragon's Dogma 2, as soon as it was released, it was instantly the most CPU demanding game I have ever played. There's not a single game that I have played since that is, well, maybe Monster Hunter. But yeah, for a single player game, Dragon's Dogma 2 is still the most demanding CPU bound game I have ever played. Nothing else comes close to that game. And then the following year, which would have been last year, Monster Hunter Wilds launches. And that was like one of the best selling games of 2025. And was also one of the games that had the highest Google Trends numbers out of all games that launched that year. And yeah, that game, it's a multiplayer game, but it was basically Dragon's Dogma 2 level of CPU bound. But now it's also a multiplayer game. So that makes it even more CPU demanding. So yeah, that one, yeah, that's the most CPU bound game I've played last year. And then and also Rise of the Ronin came out last year on PC because it was on PS5 in 2024. And Rise of the Ronin was also extremely CPU bound. But I would say I feel like RE Engine with open world is more CPU demanding slightly than Katana. Katana is you guys can see Katana Engine is very demanding, just hands down very demanding. Kind of like Square Enix with Final Fantasy 16. Final Fantasy 16, Forspoken, Final Fantasy 15, all those games are using the Luminous engine, and the Luminous engine has gotten changes over the years. And if you guys remember when Forspoken came out in, 2023, I believe? Yeah, 2023, it was really hard to run at launch. They patched it many, many times, and they did improve the performance quite a bit after, I think, the third patch. And then Final Fantasy 16 came out at the end. Well, it was 2023 PS5 exclusive, and then 2020, I think the end of 2024, it came out on PC, and it was, Final Fantasy 16. But Final Fantasy 16 was not a very CPU-heavy game. At least I didn't think it was. It was a very, very heavy GPU game. It was CPU bound too, but it was definitely... Luminous is definitely more GPU limited. RE Engine feels more CPU limited, and Katana Engine, this game, is it's hard to say, but I think it's more GPU limited than it is CPU limited. Although it's pretty hard to run on an old CPU. Because I've seen people complaining. Like I saw there was this one guy on the Steam forums that was complaining about the performance like on the launch. And he was like, I bought a 5090. I paid like $4,000 for a 5090 in this market to play Neo 3. And I'm getting like 50 FPS. Why? I have a 5090. Why am I getting 50 FPS? I'm getting dips to like mid 40s, and the average is like 63, 64, on a 5090. And he was complaining, like, why is the game so hard to run with a 5090? And well, it turns out he had an old Intel i7. No, it was like an Intel i9 9900K or something, or like a 10th gen Intel or whatever. And that was the reason. It was because he was CPU bound. So the game needs, not only do you need a really good GPU for this game that's appropriate for the resolution you're running the game at, you need a high-end CPU. So here's what he's got here. Oh wait, he talks about the PC performance, but he doesn't show us the PC results. I hope that they publish an article. This was 3 days ago. Hold on, he talks about the PC here. Performance. Hold on, let's read through this conclusion. Gameplay and visuals. As someone who hasn't played any Neo games, I have to say I really like Neo 3. The combat's great and varied. The challenge level is high, but not frustratingly so. At least during my short 4-hour stint before... Oh, the game doesn't even get that hard in the early game. I will say that Neo 3 feels like it was more approachable for the average gamer compared to Neo 2. That doesn't mean that it's easy. It definitely has optional bosses that are very challenging. And if you know anything about Neo, the real Neo starts after you finish the story. So it's always the post game, just like Monster Hunter. So, and once you go to post game, that's when the real challenge begins. So, because they've got all kinds of challenges. Anyway, that said, I reckon the sheer number of systems combos will overwhelming newcomers. Yeah, I can kind of see that. The game constantly bombards you with new systems, although it's not as bad as Arknight's Enfield. Arknight's Enfield bombarded me with tutorials and new things and new in-game currencies like every 5 minutes, it felt like. It's also worth pointing out that Neo 3 doesn't play like a Souls-like. It's more like a combination of Souls-like and Ninja Gaiden or Devil May Cry. Yeah, that's exactly what I've always been saying. Elden Ring and other From Souls-likes are much simpler than Neo 3. Yep, 100% agree there. You've got a good amount of systems and ways to approach combat there, but you don't have to use every piece of your arsenal to progress through the game. You can ignore most of the stuff. Yeah, and there's a lot of ways to cheese enemies in From Software games, even in Elden Ring. You can't, like, making them fall off a cliff, for example, in the field. Like, you can make the Black Knight enemy boss fight, like, he can literally leap to his death if you position yourself between him and the cliff, and he like jumps at you, you move out of the way, then he falls off the cliff. So there's a lot of that in Elden Ring. There's a lot of cheese that you can do in Elden Ring. You can't do that in Neo 3. The game just doesn't let you cheese enemies the way you can in From Software games. So, it says, but in Neo 3 you have to actively use a bunch of stuff, and the learning curve is much steeper. I reckon I'll return to Neo 3 at some point, but I'm not ready to commit to such a massive and intricate game right now. Yes, massive and intricate game is the best way to describe this. And this is coming from someone who has never played Neo until now. Visually, Neo 3 looks fine. It won't wow anyone, but it can look solid on Ultra settings. It does look good at 4K Ultra, but it's almost like these Japanese game engines only look good in person when you're actually running the game at 4K. If you're running these games at like 1440p or lower, they do not look that good. They really don't look that good. This game at 1080p and 1440p, this game looks like a PlayStation 4 game. Not gonna lie. It looks like a PS4 game if you're running it at 1440p. You have to run this game at 4K, native resolution, with all the post-processing effects and everything cranked up to Ultra to get it to look like a current-gen PS5 game. But then it becomes extremely challenging to run. So he's like, that said, it doesn't look like a current-gen title, more like a late PS4 era game. Oh, I don't know, like Neo 2, that was a late PS4 game. Like Assassin's Creed Origins or Odyssey. Character models look detailed, but the textures are kind of muddy, and environments have that PS4 look. Yeah, see, that's exactly what I'm talking about. Unless you're running the game at 4K maxed out, where it sharpens everything up real good, it doesn't look that good, you know, at those lower resolutions. I don't know what it is about Katana Engine, and RE Engine is another huge offender of this. Performance, on the other hand, is abysmal. My PC with an RX 9070 XT and a 5700, oh my goodness, 5700 X3D. That's not good, man. 5700 X3D can barely handle this game. That is too old. DDR4, it's too old. Can barely maintain 60 FPS with upscale. That's because he's CPU bound. He is definitely CPU bound. Because we've been streaming, I've shown you guys the game running on the professional version of the 9070 XT, and we don't have those problems. But it's because he's CPU bottlenecked. He can barely maintain 60 FPS with upscaling set to 65%. But what is his output resolution, though? Is his output resolution 4K? I hope he's doing 4K. If he's 65% of 4K with a 9070 XT, that sounds about right. But the CPU is going to pull the average down a lot. And most options set to standard or high. Dropping most settings has almost no impact on performance, with only global illumination noticeably affecting frame rate. The game also doesn't support unlocked frame rates. The only way to run it at more than 120 FPS is by using everyone's favorite technology that is called FrameGen. Neo 3 doesn't suffer from shader compilation stutters, but it does have a fair share of traversal hitching. Some areas of the first open world map are stutter free, while others are hitch fests. Also, there are occasional massive frame rate drops that happen out of nowhere, which can be quite jarring. Now, I don't remember that happening to me. I don't remember having any massive... That to me sounds like a CPU demand issue. Another issue is unreasonable... Oh, yeah. CPU. It's a CPU thing. It's a CPU thing. It's not a GPU. It's a CPU. Another issue is unreasonably high CPU demand. Despite the maps being fairly compact. First of all, the maps are quite big. It is similar to Rise of the Ronin, although I would say Rise of the Ronin is still larger. That's why Rise of the Ronin is more CPU demanding than this.
Is 9070 XT or 7900 XTX better for 4K? Is 9070 XTX coming out this year? Thinking about a small footprint desktop for the living room. The 4090 laptop is showing its age.
I appreciate the question on that. So the answer to your question on those two GPUs, the 7900 XTX is better for 4K. It is absolutely better for 4K. The only thing that it doesn't get is official support for FSR4. So that's why some people might prefer the 9070 XT because of FSR4. However, your question is about 4K. It's not about 1440p. It's not about upscaling. It's about 4K. And the answer is 7900 XTX is better than the 9070 XT for 4K gaming. Why is it better? Because it has, first of all, it has more shaders. Second of all, it has more memory bandwidth, and it has more memory, VRAM. 24 gigabytes of VRAM. Remember, the 7900 XTX has the exact same amount of VRAM as the RTX 4090 and the 3090 Ti. 24 gigabytes of VRAM is still a very good amount for 4K native resolution. The 9070 XT at 16 gigabytes, personally, is not enough VRAM for 4K gaming, and definitely not for future-proofing. So 9070 XT, in my mind, is a 1440 GPU, 1440p. And now your second question, is the 9070 XTX coming out? So okay, when it comes to NVIDIA's, or not NVIDIA, when it comes to AMD's next generation GPUs, they already have RDNA 5. This is a thing that a lot of people don't realize. Like, AMD literally showed their their AI GPU, data center GPU back at CES. They showed the whole roadmap. They announced, like, it's like the MI, what was it, the MI 450X or whatever. Lisa Su said it's coming this year, but that's going to go to data center first. So what that means is, does that mean the gamers are going to get those, the cut down gamer version of those GPUs? If so, when? I don't know. At the earliest, what I can say is AMD GPUs at the earliest, so an RDNA 5 GPU is probably December of this year at the earliest, and it will be like a paper launch. So I don't know if we're going to see any new GPUs from AMD this year. We're not going to see any NVIDIA ones. Like RTX 60 is next year. At the earliest, it'll be like Q2 of next year. So I really don't know. I said this last week. AMD's RDNA 5 should launch Q4 of this year. That is the ideal window of opportunity for them. If they delay it out for whatever reason, then they're only hurting themselves. But that's where I stand on that. But yeah, there's no new GPUs coming in the next 6 months from anyone. So what we have now is what will be available for a good long while. Okay, so all right. Let's see. I hope that answers the question. So to summarize, 7900 XTX is better for 4K. I can say this with full confidence because I have both GPUs. I have the 7900 XTX. I have the 9070 XT. I used the 9070 XT as a replacement for the XTX for a while, for several months, and found that at 4K, it runs into issues with VRAM. It's usually VRAM problems that it runs into. Monster Hunter Wilds was the biggest offender. Monster Hunter Wilds at 4K, while rendering the game using a 9070 XT, and then also trying to live stream the game on the 9070 XT at the same time, would basically exceed 16 gigabytes of VRAM. So that's the reason why I swapped out that for the 7900 XTX, and all of a sudden we went from bottlenecking at 16 gigs out of 16 gigs to 21 gigs out of 24 gigs at 4K gaming, while also streaming on the same GPU. So 700 XTX 4K all the way. So that's the answer on that. That is the authoritative answer on that as someone who owns both GPUs and still has both GPUs. So what did I do with the 9070 XT? Because I occasionally get the question like, what do you do with your 9070 XT? What do I do with that? That is my VR PC. It's a living room PC. So you're mentioning small footprint desktop for the living room. My small footprint desktop living room PC has my 9070 XT because I'm not using a 4K setup. I use a VR headset with a 9070 XT, and I use a 1080p display. That's what I use. So yes, if I'm going to game on a 9070 XT, it's going to be 1080p, but I never game on it in the living room unless I'm using VR. So it is basically my VR PC in the living room for room scale. That is what I use my 9070 XT for. So I hope that gives you some ideas into how I would use those GPUs. The 7900 XTX is used in the gaming PC. The 9070 XT is used in a living room VR small footprint desktop. And that's how I use them. So I hope that helps. Appreciate the super chat, as always. Okay. So, Neo 3, yeah, we've already read this. Okay. High CPU demand despite mass being fairly compact. Okay, we already read all of this. Neo 3 runs quite poorly on handheld PCs. It's completely unplayable on the Steam Deck and the ROG Ally, and while you can make it playable on the Xbox Ally X, not everyone will find that level of performance playable, because it's going to be like 45 FPS. We'd personally consider playing Neo 3 on a handheld as a fallback when traveling or away from home. That said, if you plan to play the game exclusively on a handheld, okay, and see, this is a really good point that the reviewer is bringing up. This is the reason why I don't have a handheld besides the Nintendo stuff. This is the reason what this whole paragraph, this 2-sentence thing here is the reason why I don't have an Xbox Ally X, nor do I have an MSI Claw, nor do I have a Steam Deck. I don't have any of these gaming handhelds besides the Switch 2 and the original Switch. And then I'll have all the PSPs and the PS Vita. But that's so old retro now, it doesn't matter. It's because of this. Because they're like, we only consider playing Neo 3 on a handheld as a fallback when traveling or away from home. So basically they're saying you shouldn't play this on a handheld unless you have no other choice. Yeah. Controller support, and then the thing is like, well, okay, what about other games? Well, you know, what type of games do most people play on a handheld device? And by handheld device, I'm talking smartphone, like Android or Apple. Oh, they're playing cloud gaming-based mobile games. And some of those games do render a lot of stuff on the actual phone, and they kill the battery life on the phone in the process. But that's what most people do. That is the majority, not the exception. So these handhelds have a tough job ahead of them because when games like Neo 3 come out and everyone praises it for being like the best game of 2026, and then you can barely play it on the handheld. That's why, from my point of view, personally, handheld gaming, it ain't there yet. It ain't there yet. I'm waiting for like 2 generations from now, handheld, to actually consider getting a handheld. Because if I can't play games like this, like games that I actually play, then why am I going to get a handheld? Like this, I'm not going to waste money on a handheld if I'm never going to use it. You know what I'm saying? So that's the reason why the Switch 2, because it's Nintendo first party, and it's got the fancy docking station included with it. You don't have to buy some separate thing. Like, it just works. And, you know, it's easy. So, all right, closing thoughts. Gameplay-wise, Neo 3 is fantastic. It's a superb action game that can be tough as nails, and that includes tons of stuff to like. Conversely, the game struggles significantly on the technical side. It runs very poorly, doesn't support unlocked frame rates. Yeah, the most you can do is 120 FPS without frame gen. Has poor frame pacing, and suffers from a plethora of various performance issues, even on powerful PCs. Yeah, even on powerful PCs. Neo 3 runs poorly even on the Z2 Extreme base. Okay, so they did test this. While you can tweak the game to achieve relatively stable playable frame rates, we understand that not everyone will find this level of performance and image quality acceptable, especially for a game that relies on quick reflexes and split-second actions. Yeah, this is definitely a hardcore action game. It's not for everyone. The good news is that you can try the demo. Yeah, okay. So we already know this. So the demo's free. The demo is pretty lengthy. It's worth trying out. I mean, I highly recommend the game. The game is so good. The game is literally the best game I've played so far this year. You played Neo 3 so hard you forgot to do the dailies on Arkfield for 3 days. Oh my goodness. Yeah, I wanted to play Neo 3. I haven't played Neo 3 at all this week. Other than, like, I think I played like an hour or two on Sunday evening off stream. And that was mostly just me co-oping with others, just helping people clear stuff, just so I could farm levels. But yeah, other than that, I mean, we're gonna be streaming it again this weekend, so there'll be more Neo 3 on this channel. That game is so good. There's like nothing else worth playing right now in my mind, unless you're playing like Dragon Quest, the reimagined. Dragon Quest 7 Reimagined is also a really good game that's out right now, so that would be one worth checking out. FSR 4 works on the Neo 3 demo, but it's broken on the game. I don't remember seeing it. Does it show up as FSR 4 in the menu, or is it one of those things where you see it in AMD's Adrenalin, but it says FSR 3.1 in the game? I didn't bother. I need to check that next time. Because when I played it, I never noticed that it was FSR 4. It said FSR 3.1. And I was using an RDNA 4 GPU. I was using my AI Pro. AKA 32 gigabyte 9070 XT. Yeah, the Radeon AI Pro. Let's see here. Radeon AI Pro R9700. I am so glad I got this GPU last year when I did, before the memory price hike and the availability issues. This is the 4K version of the 9070 XT. Remember when I said, so when I was answering the question about 9070 XT versus 7900 XTX for 4K gaming, so that question is specifically 9070 XT versus 700 XTX. And when I read the question, okay, let's use Paint, because we haven't used Paint at all this stream. So let me show you guys how the reasoning AI would break down that question. We go back to the super chat. So is 9070 XT or 7900 XTX better? Oh, the way you typed it. I'll just type it the same way you typed it. XT or 7900 XTX better for 4K? So this is the question. This is how my brain reasons the question. So here is how I reason the question. So the question is really a question of 16 gigabyte versus 24 gigabyte. This is the first thing I think of when I read the question. 16 gigabyte versus 24 gigabytes for 4K. That is the true, if you're analyzing this question as a tech enthusiast, this is the real question. Because as a tech enthusiast, you would know that these two GPUs are mostly equivalent. There is one big difference though, and the big difference is FSR4. The 9070 XT and the 9070 XT RDNA 4 is more efficient. So there's two things. RDNA 4 versus RDNA 3. I guess that's the other question. There's two different things here. So let's break it down this way. There's two diverging conversations here, or questions. One is 16 gigabyte versus 24. The other is RDNA 4 versus RDNA 3. But this, notice how I'm not including 4K in this. That's because the performance level of both of them are relatively similar. So the real question is 4K. The real question is 4K. And the other thing is, so this basically means 1440p is completely irrelevant. It doesn't matter. It doesn't factor into this discussion. So 1440p means absolutely nothing. 1080p, same thing. Doesn't mean anything. Doesn't have any value. The question is about 4K. If you want to pass an exam, you got to answer the question. You can't just rewrite some statement about 1440p and not answer the question. That's how you fail an exam. You know, that's how you fail a job interview. So the question is 4K. So okay, that means we need to talk about VRAM. That's like priority number 1 on the test. That's like the most important thing that has to be addressed is 4K. And what is the make or break for 4K? VRAM. That's number 1. That is the ruler of the roost. That's the king of the hill. What else is different? Architectural differences. Which one's going to be more efficient? Which one's newer? RDNA 4. It's more efficient. It's newer. It's more optimized for certain things. How much does that factor in when ultimately we're talking about 4K? It does factor in, but what factors in more? VRAM factors in more. So ultimately, VRAM 24 gigs is more future-proof and reliable for 2160p gaming. That is like a non-debatable thing. I have already explained how Monster Hunter Wilds plus streaming simultaneously exceeds 16 gigabytes of VRAM on the 9070 XT, making it not good for that game. So that already answers the question. So, like, reasoning number 2, Monster Hunter Wilds uses 21 gigabytes of VRAM at 4K with the high res texture pack plus live streaming via AV1 encode on RDNA 4 or RDNA GPU. It doesn't matter. Just say GPU. It doesn't even matter what it is. This is going to be the same thing. The computer will use 21 gigabytes of VRAM. 21 gigabytes exceeds 16 gigabyte max. implying RX 9070 XT is not the ideal choice. Therefore, the 7900 XTX is the better GPU. This is how like how like DeepSeek with the latest model would answer this question. All right, well, that's how I answer the question. And we've done live streams proving this. I've shown you guys Task Manager with Monster Hunter running with the 4K output while live streaming. 21 gigs of VRAM. That's how much is needed for 4K. So 4K gaming is no joke. 4K gaming is no joke. You need VRAM for 4K gaming. Because the question is 4K. If you don't address 4K, you're failing and you're not answering the question. Okay, so that answers the question. Now, here, what if we do this? What if we like, let's redo this. What if we reword the question? Is Radeon AI Pro R9700 or 7900 XTX better for 4K? If we reword the question now the question is going to get a completely different answer. Now it's Radeon AI Pro versus 7900 XTX. The Radeon AI Pro is basically the 9070 XT with double the VRAM. Double the VRAM. So now the question is analyzed in a completely different manner. Now it's 32 gigabytes versus 24 gigabytes for 4K. So here, 32 gigabyte is better for 4K than 24. Bigger, better. It just automatically is better. Now you can also go into other aspects. RDNA 4 versus RDNA 3. What is this? FSR 4. Supported on RDNA 4 officially. So what does that mean? That implies RDNA 4 is better. Not necessarily better for 4K, just straight up better. So in this scenario, how would I answer this question? It's pretty easy. Radeon AI Pro R9700 is better than the 7900 XTX for 4K gaming. And that is one of the reasons why recently I've done a lot of live streaming with the Radeon AI Pro, because you guys know that I game at 4K. I game at 4K, and the 9070 XT doesn't have enough VRAM for me for the games that I play. Oftentimes. Now, most of the time it would be okay, especially if I'm not live streaming. But when I live stream, keep in mind that if you're live streaming and gaming on one computer at the same time, and you're streaming a game that's being rendered at 4K resolution, and you're locally recording, let's break this down. Use case, GTR, streaming Monster Hunter Wilds. Game is running at 1440p upscaled via FSR 4 to 2160p. Then it is downscaled. Oh no, it is so okay, that's like one thing. So this is gonna pull about oh man, what was the VRAM number without the stream running? Well, let's not even go there right now. So what else is happening? So what does that mean? This means the game is rendered at 4K, upscaled via FSR4 to 2160p, local recording of the game at 2160p, doing about 35,000 kilobits per second bit rate. Now you guys know what I'm using for the local record of 4K footage. I'm using a bit rate of 35,000 kilobits. So you know this is going to be an incredibly large file size on this recording for a 4-hour gaming live stream. So this implies, just to give people an idea, 70 gigabyte file size for 4 hours of stream footage. So that's one thing. I'm telling you guys why 16 gigabytes is not enough of VRAM. Okay. In addition to this, also streaming to YouTube at 1440p down. So this is a downscale. This is a downscale. So remember, the GPU is having to do this. The GPU is doing this. The GPU is rendering the game. So there's amount of VRAM required for the game. Then it is locally recording the game at 35 Mbps, 4K native recording. So that resolution size is being locally recorded. There is an amount of VRAM required to do that. And then it is also streaming to YouTube. So it is doing this via AV1. And it is streaming to YouTube at 1440p downscale, leveraging HEVC. So we are using dual encoding on this GPU. I am using AV1 and HEVC simultaneously. In fact, we're doing that right now. The local recording is 2160p. That way, if I ever want to make like a standalone YouTube video that features parts of the live stream, I can create a 4K video that features parts of the B-roll footage from the live stream at native 4K. This is the reason why I do this, so I can have this as backup footage. There's a few times where this has come in handy. But then we also have to do the live stream. And we don't stream at 4K anymore because there's like a 30-second delay, and the chat didn't like that, so that's why we're streaming at 1440p. And we're using HEVC for that. So we're talking dual encode plus game rendering. Imagine, and everything is doing like 4K, it's touching 4K resolution multiple times. You're either upscaling in the game, or you're downscaling to YouTube, or you're natively frame capturing at 4K. So think about all of this workload. Think about that. So this is the reason why VRAM is a very, very important component in the system when it comes to 4K gaming. The examples I give you are based off of my own, like, real-world experience. Go to Tech Power Up Native 4K, blah, blah. We're not talking about RT, dude. Like, this is completely off topic. We're talking about 4K, and we're talking about, like, what is the better choice for 4K? The answer in this comparison, the AI Pro R9700 is better for 4K. It has FSR. It has all the things that you just keep talking about with the hardware advantages with RT and all that stuff. Hence, it's better. But if we're talking about 4K, if the topic is 4K, it has nothing to do with ray tracing. It has nothing. Ray tracing is not answering the question, so that's failing the exam. 1440p is also not answering the question, that's failing the exam. So the question is better for 4K. This is an open-ended question. So you have to address only the 4K aspect of the question to answer the question. It has nothing to do with ray tracing. It has nothing to do with any of that stuff. But VRAM plays an integral part into 4K. It plays the most important part because this is what determines like if you need to upgrade your GPU earlier versus later. So, okay. So anyway, hopefully, I mean, this was an interesting discussion because I didn't really have anything else planned after that Neo 3 mobile performance. Yeah, but I mean, I personally don't care about UE5. I play so many random games that are so diverse in terms of game engine that to me, UE5 is just another number, you know? Like, case in point, Neo 3. The game that we're talking about earlier, Neo 3, that's not UE5. That UE5 is completely irrelevant when it comes to Neo 3. It's also irrelevant when talking about From Software games or Capcom games. I mean, what was the last UE5 game that I played? I mean, I know I played some UE5 game last year, I think. I mean, what was... duh. Why am I forgetting? Code Vein 3. Code Vein 3 was the last game that I played that was UE5. Yeah, but Code Vein 3 was still, like, super hard to run for, like, most average computers. Irrespective of what GPU. It was just, like, super hard to run. Yeah, it's funny because the AI Pro, for some reason, we're in a market right now where everything is so expensive. This thing is only like $100 over MSRP right now. I mean, the last time I checked. I don't know what it's selling for currently, but I mean, 32 gigs of VRAM for under $1,500 is probably the best deal this year on a GPU. If someone has any sort of aspirations of like getting a 4K OLED monitor, this would be the GPU to pair it up with, considering how expensive everything is. So this is basically what I'm recommending. Okay. I think that's pretty much it. There is a motherboard that Sapphire has. Did we talk about this last time? There is a micro ATX from Sapphire. I don't know if this is going to be available worldwide or if this is going to be like a Asia market exclusive or something. Sapphire used to make motherboards a long time ago, though, and then they stopped, and then now somehow they decided to make some again. So those in Europe will benefit from lower prices with the board available for less than £150 in the UK, while the cheapest US price won't leave you with any change from $200. I mean, if you're doing a small form factor, I guess this is good. The only thing I don't like about it, and you guys know me, anyone who's been watching my channel for a while, you guys know I don't buy nor do I recommend motherboards that don't have postcode debugs, and this doesn't have a postcode debug. So to me, it's automatically a fail. But if you're doing a small form factor, then I guess you don't really have much of a choice. There's only a rare handful of very, very expensive micro ITX or mini ITX boards that have postcode debugs on them, and even then, like, I don't know if I'd recommend those unless you're like an extreme overclocker. So if you're doing a small form factor, micro ATX though is not what I would consider like small form factor. Really, mini ITX, which is not this, would be better at that. Micro ATX is a strange form factor because it is It is not exactly like super small form factor. You can do a small form factor build with this though. And the benefit of MATX versus MITX is that it has more PCIe slots. It just has more stuff. But I've always found micro ATX a hard choice to go with, just because if you truly need that second PCIe slot that a micro ATX offers over a mini ITX, why are you considering an MATX? Like, why not just get a full ATX at that point if you're going to plug something into the bottom slot that might overhang the motherboard and require a larger case, therefore completely defeating the purpose of the micro ATX build or form factor. So that's just one thing. Those are things that I always think of when it comes to like why, like I'm just trying to think like why would I get one of these if I was going to do a small form factor. My answer on true small form factor is get a Strix Halo Mini PC or maybe a Panther Lake when those become available. I'm happy with mine. So that being said, I am interested in doing a small form factor build if we do get like a motherboard that has a Strix Halo or a Panther Lake or something. That would interest me. But an AM5 MATX, I don't know. Like it personally, it's not for me. I'm not saying don't consider it because I don't know what your use case is, but you know, it could suit some people that need certain things. Because this is B850 though, and I don't really advocate for B850 over X870, just because I feel like if someone's buying B850, they're potentially going to miss out on current generation features. So it's almost like you're buying a last gen motherboard, if that makes sense. And I think this review article will go into some of those, and it immediately mentions one of them. Lacking USB 4 and only having a single PCI Gen 5 slot and M.2 slots, there's no bandwidth sharing to worry about here. Okay, so the other thing, no USB 4. For me, if I was doing a small form factor, USB 4 is a hard requirement. Like, I will not even consider building a small form factor that doesn't have USB 4. Because if it's all about portability and being small, that means you're going to be more dependent on external devices, external connectivity. And USB 4 is the difference. Not having USB 4 versus having USB 4 is the difference between being able to connect external SSDs and get decent speeds out of them via USB 4/Thunderbolt 4 support, as well as external capture cards, if you're going to use this as a streaming PC, for example, or external graphics cards. If you want to connect an eGPU dock to this, you need USB 4 for that. That is like a hard requirement. So I wouldn't get this because it doesn't have USB 4. But this is more of a problem due to it being a B850 versus an X870. If this was an X870 motherboard, AMD requires it to have USB 4 to be considered an X870 board. So that is the reason why we don't really cover a lot of B850s. This is an excellent example of why I don't recommend B850s. In addition to the whole, like this one in particular doesn't have the postcode debug. I mean, some people will be okay with that. But lacking USB 4, I don't know about that, because this is one of those things where if I'm truly going to do a small form factor, I want to be able to plug in potentially a Thunderbolt docking station to add a lot of external peripherals and not have it take up a whole bunch of space. Because the thing about this is if I have USB 4, I can literally like plug this in to a dock that might have a KVM hanging off of it, which means that automatically gives me my mouse, my keyboard, and my monitor all on one cable. That assumes I don't game on this. If I'm going to game on this, that doesn't really matter because I'm going to plug the display into the GPU that's on the motherboard. So that kind of changes things. But then again, the use case varies. But even if I was going to use a discrete GPU in this motherboard, what about external connectivity? Because here we're limited to two M.2 drives. Two M.2 drives, you have the dual, I like the dual PCIe slots. It's single chipset because it's B850. But it's like, what if I want to run external stuff? Like, or what if I want extra SSDs? Am I going to cut my GPU bandwidth in half by installing another NVMe via an adapter in this bottom slot? Like, that's an option. You could if this is assuming this is dual X8, you could do two. You could get 4 SSDs on this board, 2 on the board and 2 on an add-in card. So that's still 4 M.2. So that's pretty good. And that's all internal storage. What if you want external storage though? Like USB 4 gives you really, really good options there. So USB 4, man, like I just cannot. I personally can't see myself building or recommending building a computer that doesn't have USB 4 in 2026. Like, to me, that is a must-have thing. But not everybody's me, and some people are okay with that. But again, it ultimately depends on the use case. There are but small form factor typically means you're going to be more dependent on external devices. And USB 4 has so much bandwidth, especially because you would be getting dual USB 4. You'd get dual USB 4 via the ASM. So, yeah, not having that is just kind of, I don't know. Okay, so the ARGB, all the standard stuff, 4 SATA, okay. They're doing 4 SATA. I have a feeling there's some kind of lane sharing with the SATA, though, because if they're doing 4, they're doing, well, I gotta think about this. Are both of those M.2s? Both of those M.2s are Gen 5. The bottom slot is I assume this is an X8. If it's not an X8, it would be, I assume it's an X8. A Gen 5. Because you have 24 lanes. So let's think about it. You got 16 plus 8. Yeah. That's an X8. And then, so that means you have 4 SATA off of your Gen 3 lanes. And then you have Wi-Fi is not attached here for some reason. So that means there's no Bluetooth. But you could add it, unless this is a pre-production model. And then I see a bunch of like fan headers. That's good. I would like to see the back of the I/O. Okay, here we go. This is what I was looking for. So you have a BIOS update button for flashback. A single USB Type-C. That's not good. I would have liked to see at least 2 of those. 4 USB 2.0. 3 USB 3.2 Gen 2. So 3 10 gig Type A. That looks like either 2.5 gig LAN or 1 gig LAN. You have HDMI and DisplayPort off of integrated graphics. The USB Type-C might also run off of a DisplayPort alt connector wired internally. It could. AMD allows for that, but I don't know if Sapphire's doing that. I don't see any symbol indicating DisplayPort alt mode off of the USB-C, so I'm going to assume that does not drive a video output. So this does look like a very basic motherboard that is low cost. 2.5 gig Ethernet, okay, standard Wi-Fi. So it does show the Wi-Fi antennas. It's strange because in this picture, they don't show the Wi-Fi antennas. There's like nothing there. It's missing the Wi-Fi card. So I don't know which one it is, but anyway, batteries there, B850, okay, so. Component analysis. I mean, it's AM5. It's not going to pull a lot of power, so the VRMs are going to be fine. There's the Wi-Fi chip. Another big difference is Wi-Fi. It has Wi-Fi 7, but things here take a dip to Wi-Fi 6E with Azure Wave. Okay. It being a small form factor means that it would be more dependent on Wi-Fi potentially. Oh, we finally get to see what the BIOS looks like. Okay, this is their BIOS. This reminds me of the old the old like Asus BIOS from 10 years ago. Or maybe one of the older maybe the older MSI Click BIOS? I don't know. No, it doesn't really look like MSI Click BIOS. It looks kind of like the older Asus BIOS for the non-ROG motherboards. So you can see they're testing with a 9950X. SVM mode. 2.5 gig, you can see all the stuff here. Wireless LAN, Bluetooth LAN, audio, all these things. Oh, it has a bifurcation for the top PCIe slot. And the second slot is a PCIe X4, which makes me think that that means that they're actually... Oh, okay, so they're not sharing. Yeah, they're not sharing. The second slot is an X4 slot. It is not an X8, which means the GPU slot always is X16. No matter what, unless you bifurcate it into something like X4, 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 X4 for a RAID card or something along those lines. This looks like the Tai Chi BIOS to you? Does it? It doesn't make me think of the Tai Chi BIOS. I don't remember ASRock doing this UI menu on the left like this. It has the power management, it has Wake on LAN, USB power enabled. Wake up, okay. It has this by default. I don't know why MSI doesn't enable those by default. It has the FTPM and the discrete TPM. Basically all your standard things. It has, here is the, this is a very strange way to list the PBO things. SoC voltage 1.25 volts. That's a bit high. That is a bit high. All right, memory, okay, CPU. I like how it shows you kind of like everything in a way that makes me think of like Harbor Info 64, but you're looking at it from the BIOS. That's not bad. Man, if Sapphire made a full ATX with a postcode debug, I would definitely consider them for a motherboard. Because I know that they're very good with graphics cards. Sapphire makes very good graphics cards. So I assume their PCB design and quality is very good for the motherboards as well. Standard stuff, CPU fan profiles, case fan profiles. And I think that's pretty much it. I mean, it looks mostly standard affair of things. And then board software. Trick software for RGB. And you can do like software controlled fan profiles in the operating system. So this is the system setup they went with. Are the debug LEDs at the bottom of the board? I don't know if I like that, because that usually means that if you have a really big GPU, you're not going to be able to see the LEDs because the GPU is going to cover them up. You'd have to like literally lean your head over and look under the GPU to be able to see these lights. Okay, they're testing with the 9950X and the RTX 5090 from PNY. Never heard of this power supply. All right, let's take a look. Lower is better. 52 degrees on the NVMe. Oh yeah, this is like the most important thing to test actually. Wait, what is this? The Wi-Fi? This is the Wi-Fi 52C? Oh no, this is that's the NVMe. This is a Gen 5? Did they test a Gen 5? Yeah, yeah. PCI Gen 4 temperature was more competitive, 52 degrees. PCI Gen 4, 52 degrees. PCI Gen 5, 77 degrees. So it is Not the best. Yeah, the godlike... Wait a minute, why... Oh, wait, Sapphire they have the full B... Oh, I think I remember that one. But yeah, it's B850, though. I want to see, like, an X870 board from them. Godlike X and ROG Extreme. Oh, wow. The most expensive motherboards have the best Gen 5 cooling on them. I wonder why. ASRock Steel Legend does pretty good, and Sapphire Nitro B850A does pretty good. Wow. Gigabyte X3D, like I said last year, if the motherboard is a Gigabyte X3D motherboard, it's very good. So that's good. But yeah, 77 is not good. 61 is extremely good, but that's with that super thick heat pipe on that Extreme. And the Godlike, I guess the Godlike puts something on there too, because the Godlike X, I should say the Godlike X, because the regular Godlike, no. M.2 SSD temperature. Gen 5, 77 Celsius. Yeah, that sounds believable. That sounds about right. That's actually not that bad. Although it's not good, but it's not terrible. Okay, Crystal Mark, all these things. Yeah, there's the Gen 5 numbers. Performance. So here's your memory numbers. It's not really going to be that different from all the others. You can see the ROG up at the top there. Gigabyte Eagle bringing up the rear. Sapphire Nitro is kind of in the middle. And then you've got memory latency. ROG Crosshair Hero is doing the best here. I would say 77 is pretty average. Yeah, this looks like pretty average. Read speeds. I mean, it's about, yeah, it's not that good. It's Sapphire, you can see their memory read is not very good. Both of the Sapphires are at the bottom of the list there by a decent margin. And then for the writes, it's kind of in the middle. Encoding, it's, I would say it's like, it's in the upper echelon. 33 seconds is pretty good. Y Cruncher is above average. Single core in Cinebench R24, it's basically in line with all the others. And then multi-core, it is in line with all the others. And then look at some gaming here. So this is on the RTX 4090, not RTX 5090. So they're doing RTX 4090, unless this is a mistype here. 1080p. 154 FPS, and the best performing one is the Crosshair Apex at 168. So this just shows kind of how it plays around with the power limits on the CPU, the boost algorithms and things like that. So this is pretty interesting. So Black Myth Wukong, a game that is normally very just GPU bound and not really CPU bound. The motherboard, supposedly, here is pretty noticeable difference. So 77, worst result, versus, like, the best result is the Tai Chi at 86. So that's, like, 9 FPS difference there. Counter-Strike 2, whatever. Cyberpunk, it's in the middle somewhere. Overclocking, I mean... What are they going to do? They're just going to turn on advanced PBO and just auto it? So they're doing Expo 1. I kind of like this format. One thing I find interesting about this is that Sapphire is showing the impedance numbers and the drive strengths for the memory, for the signaling of the data bus, which is very, very interesting. They have those exposed to the user immediately, which is strange because normally you would think, like, you would see your TREFI, your TRC, your primary timings, all those things. But nope, Sapphire doesn't show you that immediately. Instead, they show you the things that you need to tweak if you want to do stuff like run 120 or 128 or 192 gigabytes of system RAM at, say, DDR5 6000. So it's like Sapphire is either homing in on the people who want to run 4 sticks of DDR5 dual rank DIMMs, I should say, at higher speeds, because this entire middle column is what you need to change if you want to run a ton of memory at a relatively high speed like 5600 or 6000. Stuff like TREFI and all that stuff's kind of irrelevant when it comes to that, because you're not, yeah, if you're running that much RAM, you aren't going to be pushing 6500 on TREFI. The heat density is going to be too much for that to run stable, not without active cooling on the RAM. But this is the way to go. Interesting, I can't tell where the memory... Oh, there it is. Oh, well, those are the voltages, though. I was looking for the timing. Memory... Oh, I guess they don't show... Do they not have a screenshot of memory time? I see it right here. But I don't see a screenshot of it. But I guess it's there. It's just they didn't click on it. Okay, so value in conclusion. This is a $200 motherboard from Sapphire. The positives, it can keep the SSD, the Gen 5 SSD is cool. Great value in some areas. Decent number of USB ports. I don't know if I would say that's decent number of USB ports. I think it's acceptable numbers of USB ports. Overclockable. Aren't all motherboards. I don't know if you would consider that good. I mean, I guess it's not bad. I mean, it's there, but I don't know if it's good versus bad. PCIe Gen 5 SSD and GPU support. Okay, that's good because this is not a mandatory thing for B850. This is what I mean by, if you're buying B850, you have to do a lot more research if you want certain things. Because B850, there's like no standard. You're not guaranteed USB 4. You're not guaranteed PCIe Gen 5 on the GPU. You know, there's so many cutbacks in terms of like they're just, you know, sawing off knobs, nerd knobs everywhere just to get to a certain price point, when maybe some of those things could have been included, like some more USB-C on the back or something like that. Pricing and availability, questionable in the US. EFI needs some work and is missing some key options. Although, did they say what they were missing? I'll read through that. No Wi-Fi 7. Okay, this is kind of a... Yeah, it doesn't present well when it doesn't include Wi-Fi 7, when like every other motherboard is including Wi-Fi 7. So that does kind of hurt it. Couple that with the fact that this is a mini form factor motherboard, which means that the user might have it in like a mobile case. It's easy to carry around, which means they're more likely to leverage Wi-Fi 7 or just Wi-Fi in general. So it does really look bad when a small form factor motherboard doesn't include Wi-Fi 7, when so many other motherboards in general have Wi-Fi 7. So that does hurt. And then average VRM temperatures, software lacks fan control, low end. Really? I thought they showed that you could do, I guess maybe it's just monitoring. Low end audio, few modern DIY, low end audio. Well, it didn't have the optical audio. Few modern DIY features. So yeah, like I said, it's like kind of like a basic thing. Okay, what is this thing with the EFI? EFI and software are very basic, to the point we suggest looking elsewhere if you plan on doing some serious tweaking in terms of PBO, manual overclocking, or prefer to have an abundance of fan settings. If you're more a set and forget it user, which is literally most gamers, like 90% of gamers, then this likely won't matter as much. So yeah, this is totally fine for some budget build where it's more favorably priced. Sapphire, Okay, so yeah, it's, you know, it's okay. They say it's highly recommended. It's okay. Would I recommend it? Okay, would I personally buy it? No. It doesn't have things that I need. But I'm not everybody. I'm a power user. So I definitely am not the majority user. Although when it comes to a low-cost, small form factor build, set it and forget it, going into it with that sort of mentality, I would say this is an okay motherboard. It hits a certain price point in a market where everything is so expensive right now. So, you know, I think it's okay. It's okay. Personally, I wouldn't use this motherboard because it doesn't fit my requirements. But like I said earlier, most gamers are set it and forget it. They're gonna build a new computer every 5 or so years, or they're gonna do partial upgrades, and then that's it. They're gonna turn on Expo like one time, and then forget how to do it like 4 years later, and they're gonna have to watch a YouTube video or something. But anyway, that's the Sapphire Nitro B850M Wi-Fi. It's an okay board for $200, although there's probably better options. I don't know about better M-ATX options though. I think it's okay. What you don't like about X870E is crippled chipset speed. And until you put 2 drives in RAID 0 at double speed. On AMD, you RAID through chipset. Then yeah, but are you going to RAID through chipset, though? You RAID through the CPU connected drives. You add more drives and speed is capped at. Yeah, AMD RAID has never really been that good, but AMD RAID over CPU direct connect on SoC is fine. But you're bringing up a really good point, though. You're bringing up a really good point, and this is the point that I have been like stressing whenever we talk about upcoming CPUs and what those CPUs need to bring to the table to deliver the next generation of CPU platforms. And chipset bandwidth is definitely a big problem on AMD right now. Like, Intel's double the speed. And it's been double the speed since Z690. In fact, it might be double the speed since, yeah, I think Z690. So yeah, because Intel went from DMI 3.0 or DMI 2.0 to whatever the current one is now, and they like double the bandwidth. No, it's because of the way that they designed it. It's because the chipset is here. We've already done a video on what you're saying. Like we've done a really good comparison on this like a while back. But that's another good discussion point. Okay, so let's bring up Paint again. So the AM5 is structured like this. So let's discuss X870. X870E. Because I only recommend X870E. I don't recommend the others. This has to do with the concept called oversubscription ratio. We're going to talk about oversubscription ratio. AM5. Why is this? Okay, AM5. So this is the socket with the SoC. This is the chipset. So you got your chipset down here. We'll call this B850 because that's your chipset. And then you have another one. You have dual. You have B851 and B852. So anytime you buy an X870E motherboard, you're getting 2 B850s included. So they have CPU lanes and they have the chipset lanes. So let's go ahead and quickly just mention that. Every X870E motherboard has 24 PCIe 5.0 lanes. These are directly connected to the CPU. So if you want to do RAID, you should never, rule of thumb, never RAID off of the chipset. Because of a function, or not function, because of a concept of over-subscription ratio. AMD goes hard on over-subscription. They oversubscribe. I'm not talking about YouTube subscribers. I'm talking about how many things are sharing a bus. So this is PCIe 4.0 x4 lanes. 4 lanes of PCIe 4.0 on this connection between the CPU socket and the first B850. Remember, 2 B850 equals X870E. So this bandwidth, this 4 lanes of Gen 4 handles everything that connects to the chipset. What do we have that connects to the chipset? Well, we have lanes. We have lanes. Lots of lanes. Lanes here, lanes there. Lanes everywhere. PCI 4.0 X4 lanes. Over here. What do we got over here? PCI 3.0 X4 lanes. What do we have downstream? PCI 4.0 X4. What do we have over here? Here's the tricky one. PCI 4.0 X8. 8 lanes. PCIe 3.0 X4 lanes. So let's add all the lanes. So you have 24. So if we're doing total PCIe lanes, 24 plus 8, or 4 plus 4 plus 8 plus 4. What does that equal, people? 12, so that's 36 plus 8. 44 lane PCIe lanes total. 44 PCIe lanes on X870E. That's your total lane count. Doesn't matter what generation. It's 44 PCIe lanes. Okay. This is the sort of tech that you never hear anybody ever talk about. Like, no one ever talks about this stuff. But anyway, these are the total lanes. Now let's do Intel. Let's do Intel. Intel's current generation. Z890. We might talk about Z790, so I can show you guys why Z790 is terrible. But we'll do Z890. Z890 is very good. So Z890 has the CPU. This is known as what? LGA 1851. Okay. CPU lanes. What have they got? Intel has a mixture of CPU lanes. AMD has all Gen 5 all the time. Intel has let me count for a second. 20 lanes. So PCIe 5.0 X20. 20 lanes. So 4 less than AMD. AMD has 24 Gen 5. Intel's current generation Z890 has 20 lanes of Gen 5. It is worth noting that this is an improvement, a massive improvement over Z790. Because Z790 only had 16 Gen 5 lanes, all of which connect to the GPU slot on Z790. So what that means, this is the reason why Z790 was utter trash. So let's do Z790 real quick. So this is the Raptor Lake. And I guess Alder Lake could also be used with this. So Z790 had a thing where you have 16 PCI 5.0 x16. So you have, but all the Z790 motherboards wanted to offer a Gen 5 SSD. Why? Because their competitor, which was X670E at the time, has 24 PCI 5.0 lanes. AMD has had 24 Gen 5 lanes since like AM5 launched. Z790 only had 16. So what did Intel do to be able to offer a Gen 5 SSD? They had to use a switch. They had to put a switch in here. So normally you have 16 lanes that go to your GPU. But they wanted to offer users a Gen 5 SSD slot, the top slot on your motherboard. So this means that the moment a user installed an SSD in the primary M.2 slot, doesn't matter if they're using a Gen 5 SSD or a Gen 3 SSD, it doesn't matter. As soon as they stick something in here and the motherboard detects, oh, you installed an SSD in the primary M.2 slot, which is the Gen 5 capable slot, we are now going to run your graphics card at X8 lanes. I can't tell you how many times people have like DM'd me on like Discord asking me why, to help them troubleshoot why their GPU runs at X8 lanes. And the reason why, it's always because they're on a Z790 motherboard and they have installed their Windows SSD in the top PCIe slot, therefore cutting their GPU bandwidth to 8 lanes max. I've lost count of how many people have asked me, like, why are they running their GPU at 8 lanes? And please help, please help, please help, please help. My GPU is running at X8. Did I do something wrong? Like, I need help, help, SOS, help, 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 help. My GPU is running at X8. Why? Z790, X8, 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 GPU, Gen 4, RTX 3090 Ti, running at 8 lanes. Please help, please help. I've lost count. This is why I don't like Z790, because of all these people that keep running into this problem. So anyway, that's Z790. So what did Intel do with Z890? They decided to add 4 more lanes. And by adding 4 more lanes, they give you a dedicated Gen 5 primary SSD slot that no longer steals lanes from your GPU. So this one change that Z890 did completely eliminated all those people complaining about their GPU running at 8 lanes and they have no idea what's going on. Like, why is it running at 8 lanes? I'm not using anything. I didn't install anything. All I do, I have the GPU. I just have the GPU. Like, why is it running at 8 lanes? What? That problem disappeared when Intel added 4 more lanes to fix the problem. Like, it's ridiculous, you know, like, it's like all those people just disappeared overnight. Occasionally people will still ask me that because they're on those older Intel platforms, but my goodness, 4 lanes eliminated that problem altogether. Okay, so now let's discuss the rest of this. What's over here? More CPU lanes. 4.0x4. So Intel has 4 more lanes, typically for another NVMe, and it's 4 lanes. So here's where things get really interesting. The real difference between Intel and AMD when it comes to the chipset design is the actual interconnect for their chipset. So Intel's chipset, the interconnect that they use, it is very similar to PCIe. But I believe it is, if I'm not mistaken, let me see here for a second so I get this terminology correctly. Intel DMI 4.0, let me see, is that the correct one? Yes. The direct media interface. The direct media interface 4.0. Let me make sure I have the correct amount of bandwidth. Version 4 at 16 gigatexels per second, X8, 16 gigabyte per second. So this is basically X8. It is equivalent to PCI 4.0 X8 in terms of bandwidth. That is kind of the approximate equivalency. The direct media interconnect that Intel uses, Gen 4, which is equivalent to 8 lanes of Gen 4. So this, as you can see, is a big difference in terms of bandwidth between what AMD provides for their chipset, which is 4 lanes of Gen 4, versus Intel providing the equivalent of double the bandwidth. Double the bandwidth to the chipset. So AMD, historically speaking, AMD does a better job when it comes to direct CPU lanes. They give you more, and they're all high speed. Intel, it used to be 16 Gen 5, and then you had your Gen 4 over here. Now it's 20 Gen 5 and 4 Gen 4 over here. So when you total them up, you have 24 Gen 5 on AMD, and you have 20 Gen 5 plus 4 Gen 4. So when it comes to total CPU lanes, they are equal. From a pure lane, yes, AMD has more Gen 5 versus Intel, but 24 total lanes, if we just take the total, 24 CPU connected lanes plus 24 CPU connected lanes on Intel. So they are functionally equivalent. AMD has more bandwidth because it has more Gen 5, but Intel has the same amount of total lanes. Now, when it comes to the DMI 4.0 link down to the actual, this is the Z890, Intel has an advantage here. They are not doing this stacked multi-chip thing that AMD is doing, which there's nothing wrong with doing this. However, keep in mind what I said earlier, oversubscription. So basically, what do we got here? Let's look at this bottom chipset. When I say oversubscription, what am I talking about? You have 8 plus 4. So you have 12 lanes. You have 12 downstream client lanes, basically all sharing 4 lanes of uplink bandwidth. It gets even better. You go up here to this second chipset. Now you have 4 more lanes and 4 more lanes. So now you have 8 more. So we just said 12, and now you have 8 more. So now you literally have 20 lanes sharing 4 lanes of uplink bandwidth. Think about that for a second. This is what I mean when I say oversubscription ratio. So this is a oversubscription ratio. So this means X870E has 5-to-1 over subscription ratio. 5-to-1. It's 5-to-1 oversubscribed. Five potential client devices or lanes are sharing 1 uplink lane. That's what I mean. Now, I gotta remember what Intel's... I always forget this one because no one's interested in Z890, so every single time I have to, like, look this up. Alright, let me see, where is the thing here? Where's my little thing that I made a long time ago? Yeah, okay. Wait a minute. Yeah, that's right. Okay, so here we have... I'm just going to total them up. We're going to do PCI Gen 4 and PCI Gen 3. So the Gen 4, we have 4, 8, 12, 16... 4, 8, 12, 16. And then an additional, potentially an additional 8. So we can say PCI 4.0 X16 and PCIe 4.0 X8. And that's it. Yeah, that's it. Okay. So those are Intel's lanes. The reason why I'm splitting them up like this is because these have the option to be SATA. They can be SATA or they can be Gen 4. All right, so now let's total the Intel lanes. So what do we got here? We got 20 plus 4 plus 16 plus 8. So that's, what is that? That's 48 equals 48 PCIe lanes on Z890. So Intel has a lane advantage with their current generation over AMD's current generation. You can see that the math doesn't lie. So this is the, so guys, hopefully now this now from this illustration, and we've done this on a previous live stream, but there's always new people here. So now do you guys understand why I tell people that Z890 is a superior platform to X870E? It is objectively a better platform. I'm not talking about the CPU. I'm not talking about the CPU performance. I'm strictly talking about the motherboard platform that is provided. So basically, what is Intel's oversubscription ratio, by the way? So we got 24 to 8. Right? You got 16 and you have 8. Over here, what did I say earlier? We had, what is that? 4, that's 8 plus 8, that's 16 plus 4, 20. 20 to 4. So it's a 5 to 1. Here you have, what is this? 20, like what did I say earlier? I said 20 to 4. So this is going to be 24 to 8. So, okay, let's do the math so that people can see how I do the math. This is, so AM5 over subscription. Again, for those that weren't paying attention earlier, how do you calculate this? You take your uplink, which is 4 lanes. You take your total downlink. How many downlinks we have? You guys remember? How many did we have? 20 lanes, right? 8 plus 8, 16 plus 4, 20 divided by 4 lanes of uplink equals 5. Implies 5 to 1 ratio. 5 to 1 oversubscription ratio. Now let's calculate Intel's numbers, or LGA, or Z. Well, let's just do LGA 1851 over subscription. Actually, you know what? I need to rename this. Redo this, because it's not talking about AM5, because we're not talking about CPU lanes. We're talking about X870E. I must stress this point. We are talking about the motherboard, not the CPU. We're not including these lanes. These are not included, and these are not included, and these are not included. Because we're not talking about oversubscription. We're talking about how many things are being forced to go to the CPU over this tiny little Gen 4x4 link. That is what we're talking about. Oversubscription. Again, total lanes, 20 lanes, divided by 4 uplink, 5:1 ratio. Now let's do Intel's numbers. This is going to be Z890. Oversubscription. Total lanes, 24 divided by 8 lanes equals 3:1. The lower, the better. 1:1 means you literally have no lane sharing. That literally means everything goes straight to the CPU. But you're always going to have some degree of oversubscription when it comes to a motherboard because scalability and cost. This is why Threadripper is so expensive. Now you guys are understanding why Threadripper is so expensive and why it's such a superior platform compared to these peasant chipsets. But when it comes to the platform, Intel has a better platform. They have a lower oversubscription ratio. So now I have illustrated the point stated earlier about RAID and all this stuff. But like 66, what is Xeon? We're not talking about enterprise. We're not talking about servers, though. We're talking about consumer desktop, which seems like it's all but forgotten this year with the whole AI stuff going on with the data center. But anyway, Z890 is a better platform than X870E. It's like you can't even... Obviously, okay, if you factor in CPU performance, that just flips the entire script. The only thing we're talking about here is objectively the platform. And via the math, Intel's got more bandwidth. More lane bandwidth. It comes down to Intel having an 8-lane interconnect in the form of their DMI, Direct Media Interface 4.0. Yes. So, what did I tell you guys when it came to us talking about Zen 6? Hopefully now you guys understand why I state the things that I state when it comes to expectations for Zen 6. I expect AMD to double this.
You reminded me I have a Z890 Hero that I had to buy bundled with the 5090. With thus and my 64GB spare DDR5, it saves a lot for my new setup. Not sure if the Expo RAM would work with Intel though.
It'll work with Intel. XMP works with AMD. Expo works with Intel. So you can definitely use Expo RAM with a Z890 motherboard. I've done that myself for like over a year. It works because the motherboard manufacturers make both profiles types work with their BIOS. So yeah, you can use that RAM with a Z890 totally fine. But that is the question that I see, that I can understand people asking more frequently than using... I've seen it both ways. I've seen people say, can I use XMP RAM with an AM5 platform? And the answer is yes, you can. In fact, anyone who was on AM4 knows this to be true. Because back then, everyone was using XMP in the DDR4 world. So if you had a Ryzen computer, you were using XMP memory with Zen 1, 2, or 3. So definitely AMD, you can use XMP. But the opposite is also true. You can use Expo memory, which is memory that is meant to go with an AMD platform. You can totally use that on an Intel platform, and it will work 100%. It will work. I myself have done this. I did it just to do it, just to prove it could be done. You know, I ran my XMP memory with my AMD motherboard, and I ran my Expo memory with my Intel motherboard. You can see my widgets on the glasses. Well, the only thing I have here is my little diagram to reference the chipset. That's funny. You can see the widgets though. That's hilarious. Yeah, we got Paint. We got Paint. We have the YouTube chat. We have the OBS. I have the calculator, and I've got my little diagram over there showcasing the Intel chipset, so I know what I'm talking about. All right, well, I think this was a good discussion. I actually really like this discussion about the oversubscription ratio. I don't know of any other YouTube video or anything online talking about what we just described when it came to, okay, maybe motherboard reviews, or not motherboard reviews, maybe CPU reviews when the chipset is brand new, talked about oversubscription. I'm pretty sure like Tech Power Up might have mentioned it in their review when AM5 or when Z890 debuted or whatever. But yeah, you rarely ever see this illustrated in this fashion. So if you like this sort of content, do like the video. It does help me out. YouTube, unfortunately, does not promote channels that are mostly live stream focused like mine. They definitely cater toward actual videos versus live stream content, which is unfortunate because that's the reason it kind of hinders the channel growth in that regard. So definitely like this video if you found this interesting or entertaining or even educational. I definitely appreciate that. And if you want to like continue coming back to the channel, do get subscribed and hit the bell icon because we do these weekly live streams every Thursdays. So the stream is called Tech Thursdays. This is the weekly show that I do for the longtime viewers. This is episode 144. And I think that's going to be it. I didn't think this was going to be a very long episode because there's really not a lot to talk about in terms of technology with everything being so expensive right now. So I did manage to make lemonade out of a lemon, so to speak, in terms of an actual pretty good discussion on motherboard oversubscription ratio. Well, there you go. All right, guys. Well, that's a good stopping point. I will be streaming this weekend. We'll be again streaming Neo 3. I might stream Arknight's Enfield just to get one of the character limited story events out of the way, because those are timed events, and I feel like I have no incentive to play that game anymore. So I don't know if I'm going to play it long term, but I do want to do that content before it expires. So I might stream one of the Enfield character story quest things that are available for like a limited time, and then after that we might stream Neo 3, or I'll do Neo 3 and then do that. But I feel like if I do Neo 3 from the start, then I'll never play Enfield. So we may do Enfield and then do a hard stop on Enfield and then switch over to Neo 3. But anyway, that's what you guys can look forward to on the weekend. So if you're new to the channel, typically Thursdays is the tech discussion like what we did here. And then on the weekend, I try to do like either a Friday evening or a Saturday evening live stream, one or the other. Sometimes I do both, but that's not a guarantee. It just kind of depends on like what I have going on outside of the channel. But otherwise, look forward to that. If you want to hang out with the chat or myself, you can ask tech questions during the gaming live streams. Those weekend live streams are definitely more casual focused. There's no actual agenda in terms of any like discussion like this. It's really just me trying to work on my gaming backlog and then just interacting with the audience. So stop by if you find that interesting. And otherwise, that's going to be it. We might talk about PlayStation State of Play. I have not yet watched it yet, but I will try to watch it. So on the gaming live stream, we will definitely talk about the PlayStation State of Play. So if you're interested in that stuff on the gaming side of the house, because the tech channel, or the tech game channel, the name of the channel is Game Tech Reviews. So we do focus on gaming and technology, and PC DIY is kind of the go between both those things. So if you want to talk about the State of Play, tune into the live stream this weekend and hit the bell icon so you know when I go live. Sometimes I go live Friday, sometimes I go live Saturday. If you want to hang out with us, feel free. Otherwise, guys, thanks for tuning in, and I will see you guys next week on the next episode of Tech Thursdays. Until then, take care, and I'll see you next time. Thanks.